program is brought to you by Newsworks in cooperation with the City of Eau Claire. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM.
This meeting of the Eau Claire City Council will come to order. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Beaton.
Here.
Emmanuel. Kincaid.
Here.
Klinkhammer.
Here.
Mitchell.
Here.
Strobel.
Here.
T-Walt.
Here.
Von Hayden.
Here.
Weld.
Here.
Worthman.
Here.
Zhang.
Thank you, Madam City Clerk, and welcome everyone to the Monday, February 26, 2018 session of the Eau Claire City Council. During its Monday night sessions, the Council conducts public hearings and holds public discussions in which we listen to input, invite comment, and ask questions in preparation for our legislative session, which convenes in these chambers tomorrow afternoon at 4 p.m. Tonight, the Council has some interesting items on its agenda, including a look at the Haymarket Plaza site plan, and later on we'll be holding a discussion about mobile food establishments, or I think mobile food trucks, people might know it as. We do welcome citizens who are joining us in chambers tonight and want to thank Valley Media Works for recording this meeting for people who cannot attend in person. Viewers will find a recording of or a streaming of this meeting at valleymediaworks.org. With that brief introduction, we will proceed with our work of the evening, which begins with a public hearing on a resolution approving a site plan in a P Public District for the Haymarket Plaza at the corner of Eau Claire Street and Graham Avenue. Mr. Ivory.
Good evening.
Good evening.
The city has prepared a site plan for the park and open space area called Haymarket Plaza that's located at the confluence of the Eau Claire and the Chippewa River. Eau Claire River, Chippewa River, the site located right here. I'll provide a general overview of the site plan and then highlight some of the comments from the various commissions and committees, and then Dave Solberg from the engineering department will give you a more detailed perspective of the different features within the plaza itself. The property is zoned P Public. It's about 1 acre in size. The parcel abuts the Haymarket Landing mixed-use building located to the east here, and then the Pablo Arts Center under construction to the south at this location right here. The site plan also includes the construction of a pedestrian bridge that would go across the Eau Claire River at about this location here that would connect over to the Phoenix Park property. The comprehensive plan identifies the area as appropriate for park and open space. The parcel was previously used as a parking lot and a small open space until about 2012. At that time, plans were approved by the City Council to convert this area into a park in conjunction with the plans to build the Haymarket Landing mixed use and then the Arts Center located right here. This is a aerial of the area that was taken a couple weeks ago. This would be looking to the south with the Chippewa River heading south. The Eau Claire River is coming in at the bottom in this area right here. This is the new Arts Center, the Haymarket Landing mixed use building, and then this is the site that we're talking about here tonight. Since 2012, the city has had numerous meetings looking at the different design options and having citizen design charrettes to come up with this design that you're looking at tonight. And that involved a number of different plans and then refining those plans to the design that you have tonight. This is the general overview of the plaza that you're considering tonight. The City Council reviewed a conceptual plan of this back in July of of last year, 2017. Since that time, the refinements have been made to see what you have here tonight. In terms of some general aspects of the plaza, this area is currently within the 100-year floodplain. Now, this will be raised out of the 100-year floodplain, with the exception of the area that's down along the riverfront here with the retaining wall here. The DNR has approved the plans to remove this out of the floodplain, and they're still reviewing the plans for the flood wall at this point, and that should be coming fairly shortly. The site plan for the plaza involves several activity areas. One of them is a trail connection along the riverfront, along this area here, that connects a trail over to the east here by Haymarket Landing that was built last year, and then a trail connection going to the south along a riverfront trail that we hope will be built this summer, possibly extended into next year. Also includes access to the riverfront with a stairway here down to this area here for fishermen and other people that want to get down by the river, since it's a very popular spot for fishing. And then the plaza area itself incorporates a number of uniquely designed areas that Dave will talk about in just a little bit, using a combination of different kinds of stonework, lighting, and benches and things like that. And finally, the plaza provides an entranceway to the Art Center itself here. This was one of the main functions. As shown in the design, there is some conceptual artwork that's shown here. The actual art that will be placed in the plaza will be determined at a later date. That'll probably be determined by the Eau Claire Arts Council or possibly by the City Council. The lighting for the plaza, there's 3 different modes of light that will be occurring for the plaza. Within the central part here will be a bollard style type of lighting, kind of similar to what you'd see along State Street. Then along the riverfront here will be a shepherd hook style type of lighting that's similar to what we have along our other sections of the recreational trail downtown. And then there'll be lighting on the 2 buildings here that'll provide some additional lighting for that. All the lighting will be shielded types of lighting, and all is dark sky compliant types of lighting. There is parking within 800 feet of the site in terms of public parking. Our North Barstow ramp located here is about 650 feet from the park, and then the South Farwell ramp located in this area here is about 550 feet or so. The actual bridge construction that we referred to would come into the plaza at this location here. Again, Dave will have more specifics on the bridge, but he'll have a single-span bridge of the Eau Claire River of about 210 feet, and the bridge deck itself will be about 16 feet in width and will accommodate light utility vehicles for the city in terms of doing maintenance and things like that. The plan has been reviewed by a number of different committees and commissions. First of all, the Waterways and Parks Commission reviewed the plan at their January meeting, and they recommended approval. A couple comments that they had is that since we have the trail extending along and through the perimeter of the plaza, is that the design should incorporate some kind of feature that will kind of delineate that trail as it extends through the trail to the south and over towards the east here. Also, when they reviewing the plan, there was no bicycle parking that was shown in the plans that they had indicated, and they felt that should be included, so it's not included as an afterthought at some point in the future. So the plans that you have here tonight, that bicycle parking has been added. It's located over in this area right here. And then the Parks and Waterways Commission also discussed the benches that were proposed within the park area. And they felt that there should be a variety of bench styles rather than just a flat platform for people to sit on. There should be some variety so that there are some benches would have some backs to them, particularly for people that are maybe visiting the Arts Center, that they could come out in that area. Again, there's some optional bench designs that you'll see tonight too that are in response to the Parks and Waterways. The North Barstow bid and the South Barstow bid also recommended approval of the plan. We also took this to the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee. They reviewed that last week. They also recommended approval. They had a couple comments also. I guess they all wanted to weigh in to some extent. They also agreed with the Waterways and Parks Commission that there should be a little bit of a delineation of the trail as it extends along this area here. And they did indicate for the bicycle parking that is as much as possible to make the parking visible as people are coming into the park so that the bicyclists actually use the bicycle parking and not wind up chaining their bikes to light posts or benches and things like that. So they want to make sure that bicycle parking is used. And then finally, they had a discussion regarding potential conflicts between pedestrians and bicyclists that may use the park, since it's going to be a heavily used area that'll be both, there'll be a number of bicyclists, there'll be a number of pedestrians that'll use that. It was their feeling that initially that the area should not be designated as a walk-only zone or a dismount zone for bicycles. What they thought what their thoughts initially would be is as the trail approaches the plaza from the south, place a sign at this location here indicating that they're moving into a higher pedestrian area to slow down and be cautious. Same thing, have a similar type of a sign over at this area as people are approaching from the east. It's something that I think we can evaluate over time as the plaza is being used. We do allow mixed use of bicyclists and pedestrians over in Phoenix Park and haven't seemed to have any real huge issues at this point in that area. With that, then the Plan Commission finally weighed in on the site plan at their meeting last Monday, and they recommended approval also, and I guess their comments related also to the delineation a little better of the trail along this area here. They did have a discussion about trees. Trees will be planted along the lower part of the riverfront below the retaining wall in this area here, and there'll be some trees that will be located in this area here. And again, Dave will have more specifics on that. With that, if you have any questions of the information I presented, otherwise Dave will get into the specifics on it.
Councilmember Worthman has a question.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Mr. Ivory, for your presentation and the work on this. How do we follow up with all of those recommendations, and where does it go from here in terms of delineation, tree recommendations, bicycles, slowing down, all those things? Do we need to specify if we want them included, or how does that work?
Well, the main recommendation that came through with most of the city committees and commissions was the delineation of the trail along this way here. Mm-hmm. And Mr. Solberg does have a couple ideas in terms of how that could be incorporated. Mm-hmm. And so that could be part of your motion tomorrow when you act on the site plan. In terms of the signage for the bicycles, that's something I think administratively that as we finish the construction of the park, we can provide those kinds of amenities administratively.
Okay. Can I ask a follow-up? Would it be helpful if we gave feedback on some of those other recommendations too?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Councilmember Strobel.
Thank you. Mr. Ivory, that was one of my questions. I did watch the Plan Commission, and some of the people did question the bikes and the pedestrians. What group had suggested that you did not make it a dismount or a walk only?
That was the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission.
Okay. And I haven't heard any conversation on skateboards either. Right now in downtown, we've got sort of a big problem with bikes and skateboards on the sidewalks and having problems with pedestrians. And those are actually not supposed to be on the sidewalks due to ordinance. I could see this area having similar problems, and skateboarders like to grind on benches. And I know we had problems initially in Phoenix Park. So there's a couple questions there for you. What are you doing to maybe prevent that from happening to some of these fixtures? And also, is it possible to look at some type of ordinance?
Mm-hmm. I think in terms of addressing the specifics regarding the design of the benches and things with the skateboards. I think Mr. Solberg can respond to that.
Councilmember Mitchell? Thank you. The resolution that is before us tomorrow says we approve the site plan, including the recommendations included in the report. And so do I read that correctly, that that means the conditions set by the Plan Commission?
Correct.
And that says provide a delineation of bicycle pedestrian trail extending through the site. So that's one thing that is for sure will be done with the site plan, right?
Correct. Mhm.
Okay. Councilmember Emanuel.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr. Ivy, for your presentation. A couple of questions for you. One, how is the bike rack formula calculated to make sure that there are enough per anticipated bikes?
Well, there isn't a specific, since there's not a specific calculation, normally our bike rack requirement is based on number of car stalls that are required for a development. And in this case here, there isn't a specific standard for that. So we're basically coming up with what we anticipate as we're looking at two different areas along the Haymarket Plaza, or landing area in this location here. So it'll be kind of a best guess estimate in terms of what we feel is appropriate, without overpowering the park with bicycle racks too.
And may I have a follow-up? So will there be space available, let's say if, I think a good case scenario is that there's an underestimation of amount of bikes that need to be parked there. So that's not a bad thing. So if that scenario happens, which we see that's a challenge in Eau Claire, is just to have adequate bike parking, do you feel that there will be adequate space then to allocate additional bike parking locations?
You may want to ask Mr. Solberg that.
That'd be my pleasure.
Okay.
Councilmember Weld.
Thank you, Council President. Just a quick follow-up on that subject. The mixed-use building, does it have a designated bike rack somewhere?
Yes, as part of that development, they have bike racks within their basement area.
Okay.
So that was part of the approval of that particular plan.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
And I see no further questions for you. Thank you, Mr. Ivory. Mr. Solberg?
Sure. I will go through real quickly some of the details and then try to circle back to some of the questions that had arisen for Mr. Ivory's discussion. He did an excellent job describing where we are with the plaza and the outreach that we've had. I just have some more detailed views, and I believe these are in your council packet as well. We refined the entrance coming in from Eau Claire Street and Graham Avenue to make sure it was an open, welcoming area for entering the plaza or the theater itself, as well as protruding through the plaza and then using the trail that goes ultimately to the bridge that is on the council agenda for tomorrow for award. An opportunity for art and landscaping along the Haymarket Landing building. We do have some landscaping planned. There are a number of systems in the plaza itself for electrical, computer, gas, and water for the fountains, the lights, the fire features. So we're hoping to be able to put all of our mechanical cabinets that we need in with the landscaping and either use a wrap to make them artistic or use landscaping to shield them from view. As you see the other corner, down by the stairs that access the water, this is your view looking back towards Eau Claire Street and Lake Street. These light sculptures here are in locations that we thought might be a good good area to start looking at an opportunity for art, whether they're lit like this or sculptures or something different. We'll be working with the Eau Claire Art Council to see how incorporating art into the plaza moves forward. Here's the bollard lighting that provides a little bit of illumination on the interior part of the plaza at night, and they can be turned up. This amphitheater area that we're calling the log jam, is about 4 feet in height from the high side to the low side, between 3.5 and 4 feet. So it provides a little bit of an amphitheater for viewing the water while keeping the high side of it out of the 100-year floodplain. So if there is an extreme high water event, people can use the plaza, can go around. This area would be underwater, but the trail around it would still be viable for that. This was some of the seating. There's a request to have seating either with a back on it, like a bench seating near the Arts Center, or to have something at a higher level, maybe 24 inches or 30 inches higher, so you don't have to get into a full 90-degree seated position if you have arthritis or other mobility concerns. This is one example of a way to accommodate that with a cut and polished stone that has more of an elegant look that would tie in with the theater. But would still have the same colors and the textures as the rest of the plaza through here. So the final design or the final selection of those will be dependent upon cost and vendors that are out there. But this is an example of a benchless cut and polished stone seating. These are examples of a stone seat, and these are representative of real stone seats, even though they look like they're kind of inflatable. They are stone, but they would provide a back seating that a lot of people enjoy when they're using our Dumar benches in Phoenix Park. So it would provide a back seating and then also a backless seating possibility in front of there. And this is another option for a polished stone or a manufactured stone that would have a higher finish than the rocks and the boulders that you typically see in Phoenix Park. And this could be at alternating heights too, of being lower for a more traditional seating surface or at a higher elevation. As you see, the ones in the background are a little bit higher. You can see the fire feature, one of the fire features in this location. The operational parameters for the fire features and the fountain are accommodations that we're going to be working through once we get the actual bid documents out, and we can concentrate from the construction documents into the operational concerns. This is a view over by the transformers that you see on site currently, looking towards the front door of the theater. We tucked in some bike racks. We'll try to accommodate as many bicycle racks as possible while still staying within our guidelines for Xcel Energy to be able to service the transformers. They do need a certain clear area around it. We did tuck some in there. For the total number, like Mr. Ivory had said, we don't have like 100 or 75 in mind. So we're trying to get a tasteful number where we can have them in there. We certainly don't want to have bikes attaching to our $1,000, $2,000 lights that we have out there. So we're going to try to get as many bicycle racks as possible in appropriate locations. And we may have to spread out on the Riverwalk Trail on either side of it, outside of the plaza as you approach it, and possibly even the street. Because the plaza is going to have a large number of pedestrians in it, so we have to try and strike a balance for, possibly even look at Phoenix Park across the footbridge too. So we'll see what we can get in there to start with, and then that'll be something that's a relatively low-cost item to add in the future if we need. Hopefully we're pretty close to the number that we need to start with. And then here's the bridge that is connecting Phoenix Park with Haymarket Plaza, about 33 to 35 feet tall in the middle. Overlooks in the middle of the bridge also, one looking each direction, and 210 feet long with a wood deck on it. The truss on it is similar to the truss in Boyd Park Bridge, but because of the length and the need to clear span the river for permitting reasons, it does have an arch over the top of it. You can see the bank along the river, and a lot of the cottonwood trees that were there currently right along where the wall goes are gone. Our DNR permit for this states that the trees that are along the water line should stay. So it won't be like it's shown in the rendering where it's completely barren, but some of those large trees that are there are right where the wall will be going. So they will be removed, and the DNR has requested that we plant more native species, preferably river birch, along the wall in the future upon construction finishing for that. And then also, they would really discourage the use of riprap along here. So in the areas that we don't need to use riprap, we'll have native plantings and shrub species that have a deeper root structure to environmentally stabilize it without having riprap. So there'll be some riprap along the bridge where it comes down that ties in with the riprap that was previously constructed, but the rest of the bank through here will be a natural bank, and it will have a little trail on top of it at the base of the wall. So when you're coming down on these stairs, you'll be able to walk along the base of it, get onto the trail that was currently constructed up to the Barstow Street Bridge, and also access the water through here if you would like. Similar to the trail that is there now, there's about a 1 to 2 foot wide trail through the sand, and we're hoping to create that when we're done. Here's a view from the middle of the bridge with overlooks looking each direction. 16 feet, and the bridge is lined up, so as you're coming, if you're parking in the North Barstow parking ramp or in the North Barstow area walking to an event at the Pablo Center, the last frame of the bridge door frames the front door of the theater. So it's intuitive for people not familiar with the area to find their way to an event, and it's also wide enough to adequately support bicycle and pedestrian traffic. The minimum trail widths are usually 8 feet. We try to get 12 feet, and we have 16 feet here, as we feel it's going to be a very heavily used bridge. And then as you approach the end of the bridge and off to the side, see how it touches down. We have an area for bike racks and landscaping along the edge here. We have some landscaping along the edge of our property line that will hopefully be able to accommodate our mechanical cabinets for the outdoor seating area and the fountains in the splash pad and the fire features. And then here is the last detailed slide that I have, where we have the edge of our elevated deck here that has a wood, looks like a wood surface, but it's actually a wood planking stamp pattern, so it looks like wood, but it'll be concrete, so we don't have the replacement and maintenance responsibility for that in the future. That is this area here. And there will be either river birch, or we're looking at quaking aspen, or sunburst locust, honeyburst locust in this area to try and have a filtered sunshine. So this area will be shaded, and then there will be some trees that will be coming up along the side. And we're working with the Pablo Center along their property line in this area, if they would like some ornamental trees or some smaller trees there as well. That was a comment from the Plan Commission. The textures of the stones here, this is shown as concrete and these are shown as pavers. We want to have the color pattern that ties in with the buildings and is tasteful. Whether it is a paver like you see a lot in Phoenix Park, or the streetscape on Barstow and Graham Avenue, or if it's a stamped and stained concrete like you see on Thorpe Commons, those are decisions that will be budget dependent. The pavers are more expensive than stamped and stained concrete. But the pattern that you see in the overall is a pattern that's meant to represent the river, kind of represent a swirling and a combining and an eddy pattern that you have where the confluence of two rivers would come through, and provide a slight wayfinding to the front door of the theater. And then the last change from the master plan that was approved, in this area here where we have the amphitheater viewing the water, previously we had them lined up like logs going down a river, perfectly straight. We had a lot of feedback that it looked a little bit too church pewy, and we turned it into the log jam. So it's meant to encourage interaction. So if people are sitting here, they can face each other, but they're not lined up so that they're seeing the backs of each other's faces. And then it's more of a random fashion, as you may have witnessed logs going down at some point in the past. As far as the delineation, the three main points that we had with feedback were the bench seating and the seating varieties along the theater, bicycle racks within the plaza, and then some way to physically delineate the trail going through here. So we obviously don't want to paint a yellow double yellow line like you see on some bike trails through the new plaza. So what we're looking at is with a scoring pattern, maybe we can have a scoring pattern that when you're driving down a highway and you have concrete pavement, you have that center line joint. If the double yellow line is not on that joint between those, draw you to follow that, to have some kind of a subtle joint pattern, or to have, if the budget affords pavers here, to have pavers that are consistent with the color themes, try to create a subtle row that when you're coming this way looking through here, they would line up, but they don't detract and scream, take away from, I guess, the overarching landscape pattern. Or there could be some other possible reflected, if there's art, we're looking at including under the benches an opportunity for mosaic or artwork. Could there be something that could be in the pattern that would be more artistic? And there is even that we're looking for, I guess, these little specks of color that you see here. The company that makes the lights that are going on the exterior of the theater have 2 and 4 foot long panels that you can put in concrete and put in the lawn, and you can light them. You plug them in, they're watertight, and then you can walk on them, you can drive a lawnmower over them, you can do everything to those. And that's even an option that we're possibly looking at, that if we have a little light here, can we incorporate light so that when you're on the trail going through it, it'll direct you through, but it doesn't become as I guess distracting for the overall artistic theme as a double yellow line or something like that. So that's the one that we're working on right now. We don't have it finalized, but when it comes time to award the bid for this, that will be in the bid, and we'll have an explanation on what we came up with. Probably before then, if you would like to know. That'll take any questions.
Questions for Mr. Solberg? Councilmember Klinkhammer.
Mr. Solberg, regarding the delineation of the bicycle path, do you have a sense of what the sight lines will be for pedestrians coming off that bridge, and where it's going to intersect with that bike lane?
It will be open. Everything is very open through here. You will be able to see from the bridge. I'm not sure if the rendering. When you're coming through here,
I think that one that had the, looks like you said there were going to be possibly bike parking and plantings in there,
yeah, right here.
My concern, if those plantings are that tall, I don't know how tall that is, but if that bike path is going to go right by the front of that, or the end of that bridge, there's a significant risk there.
Yeah, these would be, and these were grabbed for the rendering. They would be some of the lower species, probably, like you see here. We wouldn't want some of the taller ones you see in Phoenix Park that are more than the natural. This is going to be not as natural and as wild. And not that Phoenix Park is overly wild, so it'll be more manicured. The trees will be more manicured. We're not going to ultimately see 60-foot tall trees in the middle of it. It'll come back, but it'll be, everything is pretty open through here. There are plantings along, on our side of the property line and on their side for the Haymarket Landing, but it's generally pretty open through there for those sidelines.
My only concern was the bicycle traffic going right past the end of that bridge with people walking off of it.
And we may, one other item that was in the master plan, but I'm not sure the budget is going to afford, is there is a location for a sentinel sculpture out here, something that's more significant, that's a little bit taller and grander, that was identified in this area. At some point in the future, this may be a statue base or something in here that the plantings would come out. And if we need more bike parking, we're trying to find, instead of trying to think a little bit outside of the box. Instead of the bike racks like you see here, which were a different style than we have now, we wanted to find a standard option, but we're trying to find an artistic option too that possibly doesn't exist, but there are some very creative minds. That may end up being all bike parking if we need to. So.
Councilmember Strobel.
Thank you. You're going to make me burn up one of my questions, aren't you? I'm not going to ask. I'm going to ask a different question. You mentioned bollards, and those have electricity in them. Can you show us the design of the plaza and show us where maybe like electrical would be? And I'm thinking if there's ever, bands or other types of entertainment that are going to need to plug in.
So these are a representative, and we're pricing those out too, but this is a bollard light right here where the top part glows. You can see another here, and it casts light down, but it's not going to be bright where it shines throughout. As far as if there are performances in the theater or in the plaza itself, the electrical boxes we're looking at locating in the landscaping along here. The fountain has a mechanical box that powers it. The lights that are in here and lighting on the bridge would need an electrical cabinet as well. So we need to locate those along here. In worst case, there would be one tucked in along here as well. But there will be plugins, and we are working with the acting or interim director for the Confluence on what kind of needs bands have out here. So we'll have the ability. You won't have to haul large electrical equipment and run cords around here. You'll be able to hook up in here. Where the conduits are going, the feed will come in off Eau Claire Street. We'll have our main electrical box over here, and then the conduits will be underneath the pavers on it. So,
okay.
And then I guess the other, to circle back, so we can save on questions for skateboard, trying to accommodate skateboard features. A lot of times with this, the edge of this surface here would be an ideal spot for a skateboard, as well as a lot of the stones. And you can incorporate little either metallic discs in there at a right angle, almost like a big quarter, or polycarbonate. So if this is a stone surface on top where those stone sheets butt up together, like you would have here, you'd have a real subtle, just a little lip that sticks out about a half an inch or so. And you don't notice it unless you're looking for it, but it creates it so that plane is not smooth like that. If more benches go out here in the future, those benches are designed so it's not a horizontal rail, they go perpendicular. The benches specified over here are going the other direction, and we are having skateboard problems with those. So that is something that we're going to try to include in a tasteful and very subtle manner. Some of the measures that can be included in, whether it's a rack and there's a little inclusion, or even just the joints between them. So.
I have one more question, if I might. Nobody asked us. I thought they would. The design of the retaining wall, will that be a similar design and pattern of the existing wall next to the Haymarket Plaza, or how are you envisioning the look of that facing Phoenix Park?
Well, the look of the wall facing Phoenix Park would have the same stamping pattern that you have next to it. One thing that we thought was that as you're going around the corner here, and even the wall that's in front of the Haymarket Landing building, maybe the staining pattern might be a little different to reflect some of the materials that are in the backdrop as opposed to at the Barstow Street Bridge, but it'll have the same pattern. The railing along there is the same railing that we have in our downtown trails. There will be conduit in there for future lighting for it. Here's our standard downtown rail that we have. We do have the Shepherd Hooks lights that you see. There will be a blister approximately every 70 feet along here, and that light will hang over the trail, and those lights can be dimmed at night remotely, so we can put them on a timer so they can go down to 50% at 2 o'clock in the morning. And then, possibly at some point in the future, we can have artwork or light work on the wall, or it will be just a tasteful wall there. It's about 10 feet tall throughout the majority of this, and the plantings down below will get up probably 3 or 4 feet, so you'll see about 6 to 8 feet of it visible during the summertime. So it'll be a wall out there, but it won't be as pronounced as the wall when you get along the river, where it comes right down to or along the Haymarket Landing building, where it comes right down to the water. That's probably approaching 15 to 20 feet or so. So we're able to get out of the water with a natural slope and away from it, with it being at the floodway, where they weren't able to avoid that over here. So.
Beaton?
Thank you. First, I wanted to say thanks for taking the input from the Waterways and Parks Commission. We had a long discussion on this, and I really appreciate that you took that feedback and took it to BPAC as well upon request of the Waterways and Parks Commission. I also appreciate that there's bike parking in the proposal now. So I also wanted to add that there are some artists locally that actually, some super talented artists that have welded some artistic bike parking things. So you might want to look locally. I did have a question about a comment that BPAC had as far as placement of bike parking. When we were talking about it in Waterways and Parks, I hadn't even considered, but it was helpful that BPAC mentioned, from what you said, that bike parking could be at the entrances of the park to, so that people can kind of see it and dismount if they're done biking and park their bike there. And so do you see bike parking at each of the entrances, or just there on the, what is that, the east side?
Now this would be the west, or I guess the north side.
North side,
And then this is the south, and then this would be the west side. So we have some here. This gets very tight in this location here. So if there's bike parking right at the entrance, we would have to work with the adjacent properties to see what could be accommodated in this location. Right around the corner, you come in and we have some along here. And then the Riverwalk Trail will pick up in this location. The plaza stops about here, and the Riverwalk Trail extends to the south. And we're looking at a spot in this area here that we could possibly tuck some in. The Riverwalk Trail will be bid separate from the main part of the plaza and separate from the wall here. So that will be something, but I think we'll be able to accommodate some bike racks in this location also. It is, I mean, if you go around downtown and you see, if you don't have bike parking, we are going to have bikes chained to everything vertical down there, and we don't want to have, you know, our expensive finishes down here, you know, misused like that. So it is something we are going to try to accommodate as much as we can.
Great, thank you.
Well, thank you, Mr. Sober.
Council President.
Exciting. Oh, sorry, Councilmember Worthman has a question.
Thank you, Council President.
Sorry about that.
Mr. Solberg, I believe it was Mr. Ivory who said, or maybe you had said, that there's going to be access for people who are fishing down at the bottom, and then there's a set of stairs that go back up. Are those shown in the plan?
It's one stairway that comes down, and you go up and down both stairs.
It doesn't connect further east?
Nope, it brings you down, and you can go up to basically the Barstow Street Bridge, and then that blocks you for the current trail that's there. Or you could proceed down along the bank, and by the Grand Avenue Bridge, the way the grades come down, you can come up to the Riverwalk there. I think there are. That's probably about it. I'm not sure if there's steps down by the parking deck or the Graham Riverside building currently, but yeah, it's not meant to be you get on here and then walk like a trail like the Riverwalk is down below. But we did want to make sure that people had access to go down there. A lot of people that fish there in the summertime. If kids are down here and they want to go down and see the water, I mean, I think everybody's kind of drawn to the water and wanted to make sure that it was accommodated safely. So we have about 10 steps down, a landing, and then another 10 steps down.
And then you said, just so I can clarify, that the trees would have to be removed because they're essentially in the location where the wall is going to go. And then the trees, as you head south on the trail, can some of those potentially be kept? Like, are any trees going to be kept? Because I know I've had constituents and people ask if that's at all possible or doable.
Pretty much all the big cottonwood trees that you see along the theater and along the wall here are gone. There are a number of trees that are along the waterfront. I guess this is a good picture. So the trees that you have down along the bank here stay in, but the ones that are up on top, the wall, it's about a foot wide or so, a little bit wider than a foot, but underneath it, you have two rows of piles that are about 10 feet apart, and then you have a pile cap or a footing. So when they're down digging and excavating to put that wall in through here,
They have to.
the root structure, even if we didn't hit the trunk, which most of these, it goes right into the trunk area, the roots are damaged so bad that they'll die afterwards. So
Okay.
the DNR had requested, if these are coming out, plant them with more natural species. And
So we'll just have to wait a few years till those grow.
They'll
those
grow back.
again.
They'll-
Okay. Thanks.
Okay, thank you again, Mr. Silver. Did any members of the public come tonight to speak about the plaza site plan? Seeing none, the chair will close item 1, bring our attention to item 2 on our agenda, which is a public hearing on an ordinance rezoning property on the south side of the North Crossing, east of Jeffers Road, from C2P to R3P, and to adopt a general development plan. Mr. Tufti.
This is the property located east of Jeffers on the south side of the North Crossing. There's commercial zoning to the west, multifamily to the south. And that's the site on an aerial photo showing the home builder's existing office to the west, a large apartment building to the south, power line corridor, and vacant land to the east. This is the development plan then for the property with site access off an existing private drive. It's a 30-unit apartment building. It has parking underneath it, detached garages, and surface parking. Building elevations depicting the appearance of the apartment with floor plans. And there's a certified survey map for the property. And this is a 30-unit apartment building. The current zoning for this development plan allows the existing home builder's office and a private drive with private utilities to a second lot that was proposed then for another office building. The amendment that is before you this evening is to allow a 30-unit apartment building on that back property. Now, the one concern with the request is that its access and utilities are all from the existing private drives and private utilities. And the long-term maintenance of this drive and utilities will need to be established in agreement between now 2 property owners, the purchaser of this and the Home Builders Association. Now, that private drive is also partially on property to the south, and that third party will likely have to be involved in an agreement. These will need to be addressed as part of the final site plans. The Plan Commission did add a condition that if those private utilities can meet public utility standards, they should be providing a public utility easement to the city for the maintenance of these utilities. And city engineering and the applicant's engineering are working on determining if they meet those standards at this time. The comprehensive plan does designate the site as being appropriate for commercial development, and then the text of our plan has criteria to consider in allowing residential development in a commercial area. Again, this property does have a large senior housing apartment immediately to the south with a hillside to the east, which likely will render it not buildable. The engineer's report within the packet talks about traffic, utility, and drainage impacts. The site does have ample room for parking, and the other site improvements that we normally see with a development such as this are reviewed with final site plans, which will go back to the Plan Commission. We did attach the city engineer's report. The Plan Commission has recommended approval with conditions. Final site plan requires Plan Commission review and must address all issues noted in the report. An agreement for the long-term maintenance of that private drive and private utilities will be filed with the final site plan for Plan Commission review. A city utility easement will be provided for the private utilities if they meet city standards. And again, they are working on making that determination. And then finally, compliance with the recommendations in the city engineer's report, which will address the drainage of the property. Are there any questions?
Questions for Mr. Tufti? Councilmember Strobel?
I just feel like asking you a question, because is, is this your last Monday presentation to us?
It is.
And there's my question. Thank you.
That will be your last question, I guess.
Okay.
Anyone here to talk about this rezoning request? Seeing none, the chair will close item 2. Item 3 is a hearing on a general development plan for a C2P zone property on 1004 Menominee Street. Mr. Tufti has news for us.
Applicant has requested this item be withdrawn. It's on your agenda since it's a noticed hearing, so there may be public here for the item. Council's past practice is to postpone this item indefinitely at your meeting tomorrow.
Thank you, Mr. Tufti. Did anyone come to speak about this rezoning request? The chair then will close item 3, and that brings to an end our hearings. We do have one public discussion tonight on an ordinance amending Section 13.12.066 of the code entitled Mobile Food Establishments. Mr. Pippinger.
Good evening. Before the City Council is an ordinance amending the Code of Ordinance entitled the Mobile Food Establishments. The City of Eau Claire has an ordinance that allows licensed mobile food establishments to vend and sell food in city parks. This amendment expands this ordinance to include the following neighborhood parks for year-round availability: Boyd Park, Lakeshore Park, McDonough Park, and Half Moon Lake. Currently, the ordinance does allow the year-round use of Pinehurst Park, Carson Park, Phoenix Park, Owen Park, Riverview Park, and the Soccer Park. Additionally, the following parks for the months of June, July, and August from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. one night per week will be Newell Park, Kappas Park, Cameron Park, Mitcher Park, Demler Park, and County Farm Parks. Here's a map of the parks that we're looking at for year-round availability. Would be McDonough Park, located on the north central side of the city. Half Moon Lake Park, located on the area where the beach is. Boyd Park off of Main Street, and Lakeshore Park. The reason why we selected those parks for year-round availability is that they have some buffering capacity from the neighborhoods, and we feel that they would be more appropriate for the year-round. The parks that we looked at for just the 3-month for June, July, and August, County Farm Park, located on the west side, Cameron Park, again on the west side, Newell Park, located on the lower west side, Demler Park, more in the area of the 3rd Ward, Kappas Park, again in the 3rd Ward, and right down to the south there is Mitcher Park. Looking more specifically at those parks that I mentioned for the year-round, this is Boyd Park, again located here on Fairway Street, Summer Street. Main Street is just to the south. We have the parking lot area along with the shelter areas there. We would select an area within this parking lot as a designated area for the food establishment vehicles. Lakeshore Park, again, Lakeshore School is located up to the north east of here. We've got Broadway Street, 9th Avenue. In the parking lot area, here's the shelter. Currently it's not showing on this, but there is a little skate plaza there. We would pick a designated area within this to allow a food establishment vehicle. McDonough Park, again, entrance off of Center Street. Come in, we have a shelter area. The main parking lot area, we would designate an area here. We also have 2 additional parking lots that were developed through the pickleball group that we would designate an area in these areas also. And then finally, for the year-round parks, this is Half Moon Lake Park off of Randall Street access. We have the large parking area above the beach. We designate an area in that location for the mobile food establishments. And some of the smaller neighborhood parks that are located, that again, this would not be year-round availability for this, but it would be for the months of June, July, and August from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. one night per week, would be this area here. While it's a very small area, we do have quite a bit of area on the street that the mobile food establishments could park. But again, this would be an area here that we would designate for a mobile food vehicle. Cameron Park. This is off 11th, just to the north of Cameron Street. It's got a rather large parking area next to the shelter area. We would designate an area within here for the mobile food establishments. Here's Demler Park off of Putnam Drive. We have a shelter, we have the basketball courts. We would designate an area within this area coming into the area as an area for the mobile food establishments. County Farm Park. Again, this is located on the upper west side off of County Farm Road. We have an area that comes in. We have a rather large parking area, shelter, got some paths that come through in a parking or a playground area. We designate an area within this parking area for a mobile food establishment. This is Newell Park. This is located on the west side, lower west side. This is off First Reserve Ferry Street, and we designate an area within this small parking area for a mobile food establishment. And lastly, Kappas Park. This is located in the 3rd Ward area off of Gilbert Avenue. This road is actually a right-of-way. It's a vacated right-of-way here, still is owned by the city, but we could establish an area through here for a parking for a mobile food establishment. Again, we'd still have access on the street that would be acceptable. The idea here is to encourage neighborhoods to come out and have dinner together in the park one night a week. The Parks and Recreation Division will drop off party game bags to enhance the experience. This is a way to get neighbors out to meet each other. Statistics show that neighborhoods that know each other have less crime rate than those that do not. Again, this was brought forth to the Waterways and Parks Commission, and they recommended approval at their January 24th meeting. And they did have some recommendations. One was not to limit the day of the week. Initially, with the draft we had, we limited in the parks that we were going to have this opportunity for 3 months out of the year, June, July, August, to just one night per week on a Thursday. That was encouraged not to do that. Additionally, they recommended that which is not part of the ordinance, but as a recommendation to the Community Service Department, was that to have at least one item on the menu to be less than $2.50 for an entree. And that was to encourage families that perhaps had larger groups in the family, or perhaps had some income challenges, that they could also participate in the event. And then also look at more seating options within the park. And we have that ability. We have several picnic tables that we can move around, and if neighborhoods want to do this, we can certainly help out with that. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Councilmember Bundy.
The question, your concept is great. I like the idea of this, and I like the idea of expanding it to the all the rest of the parks. How do they go about knowing who's going to be there, or who makes a reservation for the food truck coming in? Is this more than one, or do they have work with your department to say, okay, I'm going to be at Half Moon Lake for the parking at this time?
Yes, we have a reservation system that they would contact the Community Services, Parks, and Recreation Division and let us know that they're going to be that. We're going to try to get a little bit more involved in this too, to try to get the neighborhood associations together to create this opportunity.
Will this be one truck coming in at a time, or can it be more than one, or generally speaking, is it just one?
No, it can be more than one. In fact, we would, I think in the event of trying to get more of the mobile food establishments involved in this, it would probably be an experience that would be more favorable for the neighborhoods, but it could be one. I mean, if the neighborhood associations decide, or the neighborhoods want just one and they have one, certainly that can work too.
Okay, but it would be a reservation system, and they would say in advance how many space would be available for them.
Yeah, we would work with them.
Okay, thank you very much.
Further questions? Councilmember Emanuel.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr. Peppinger. A couple questions for you. Has staff discussed the idea of having this 7 days a week? And can you share a little bit about why it's not being proposed at 7 days a week?
Well, I think the main part was we want to get this going in one night per week in a neighborhood, in smaller neighborhoods, to make sure that this will work and it doesn't create any problems with the neighborhoods at all. I mean, and perhaps we can expand that, but the idea was to start out with one night per week and then perhaps expand it at some point. I mean, but we haven't, when we initially started, we started with 6 parks that we would allow the mobile food establishments to be in the parks. We're going to some of the smaller now neighborhood parks to try to enhance and get the mobile food establishments to say, hey, this can be profitable for us to do so. But that did come up, and that was a question initially with the Waterways and Parks Commission, is that we had it limited just to one day. We had Thursdays and just one night per week. We still stayed with that because we don't know where this is going to go yet. This is somewhat of a, I would say, an opportunity to see what we can get going with this project.
I have a couple of related follow-up questions. I can start with one, if that's okay. Thank you. I guess an observation that I would have is Thursday nights are super fun time in Eau Claire because of the standing concert at Phoenix Park. And I know that a lot of mobile food trucks will participate there through the agreement with the Sounds Like Summer event. So I wonder if we even have enough food trucks in Eau Claire that could populate all of those parks also on a Thursday night. So that's one question I have. And then my second question is, what is the feedback that you're receiving from food truck vendors? Are they saying that one night a week, Thursday night's okay, or are they asking for more latitude?
Your first question, the reason why we went away from just Thursday nights was exactly what you said. There are a lot of events going on Thursday nights, so we went away from just limiting it to the one day. So we're allowing it to be, Sunday through Saturday. So that's an opportunity for families to get out. It doesn't have to be a Thursday. It can be a Wednesday. It can be, in a park. We can certainly do that. The feedback, I haven't had a lot of feedback, but I know I've heard through DECI that they've had some discussions with some of the vendors, and they like the idea of expanding to more parks. They had some other issues just with the ordinance in general, and I know there's a meeting that will be coming up on, I believe, March 15th to discuss some of those other issues.
Thank you.
Member Worthman?
Thank you, Council President. Sort of following up on that same line, how has this ordinance been going? What has been the feedback for what we've had in place so far?
If I understand your question, currently there hasn't been a mobile food establishment that has taken out a license to do this.
Okay.
So typically when they're involved with a special event, which we allow that through special event, and they don't have to have this. We're trying to expand this so we can get them into the parks a little bit more and trying to get them to be part of this part of the ordinance.
I thought maybe I had remembered wrong, but that there was a few parks where we allowed it at certain times in certain locations. That's what we had on the books already.
Yes.
Correct.
Those
And
are
that was, the demand was more than that could accommodate, is what you're saying? No. No one was wanting to do it.
Outside of a special event.
There wasn't much.
We haven't had
Okay.
a movement on that, no.
Okay.
Councilmember T-Wall?
Thank you, Council President. My question, too, is just connected to that one night a week, suggesting that look at being expanded. I don't know how the message is going to get out and when people are going to find it. And if I was an operator with some free days, then I need flexibility. The other reason I might suggest is June through October. You know, we do have weather that can change. So how do you address what day it is at what park, the next week, what day, what park? And adding those 2 more months, we can have a lot of great nights to get out. And that would give operators more chance. That's the economics. If I was to just show up at a park on one day that I got scheduled, I may not find families, I may not. After they see us 3-4 weeks, they might catch on. So maybe explain the communication, how the public finds out, and if that could be expanded to more months. And your reflection on that, please. Thank you.
Sure. Well, again, I think the success of this is going to take the Community Services Department to work with neighborhood associations to try to get a movement to get families out to have dinner in the park. That's something that we're willing to do, and that's what we want to do. Again, the one night per week was more of a, we can change that, certainly. I mean, if there seems to be a desire to do that. But again, I think a lot of it has to do with the number of mobile food establishments we have in the city and how we'd spread that out if we had, we're adding several new parks to this. If we ever get to a point where we're having that many nights to where people are having dinner in the park, that would be great. And I think that could certainly get more interest in the mobile food establishment services.
Thank you.
Councilmember Von Hayden?
Am I correct, and you mentioned that there's a meeting coming up with some of the vendors here in March?
Yes, I believe there's a meeting coming up in March sometime.
Wouldn't it make sense to defer this ordinance until after that meeting to get their input in case there's something they would want to change, or don't you feel that that's necessary?
Well, again, I'm not sure what they'll come up with. That group met outside of what we were doing at the time. Our purpose here was just to expand the number of parks that we would give this ability to get the mobile food establishments in. So we weren't looking at any other part of the ordinance at that time.
Okay, so if they would come up with something significant or that, we could always amend it in the future, is
Correct.
what you're referring to, I'm assuming.
Correct.
Okay, so this primarily at this time was just expanding it to more locations.
Expanded to more locations.
Thank you.
Councilmember Strobel?
Oh, thank you, and I think I heard this from you. I was trying to figure out who initiated this, because I was wondering if we were getting a lot of participation by the vendors in the parks, and you were saying it really wasn't, but we were trying to encourage that by doing this. So is this a staff-initiated?
Yeah, it was, and, we're looking at the, part of it is we do a big event where we do the night the crime, put the crime out, in the park night. This would be expanding that to try to do it a little bit more often with smaller group neighborhood associations. And again, as I mentioned, statistics show that neighborhoods that know each other, we have a lower crime rate. So we're going to try to target some of those areas and try to bring those groups together so they know each other. We're doing a great thing over at Sundead Park, and that could be another that at some point we expand to that area.
Yeah, it's a good thing to initiate something like this. It sounds like it might be a winner. Question for you on the signage for that, because initially the signage that we had maybe wasn't quite right, and I think it's been changed since then. I think the signs that you post say food trucks allowed from 4 to 9 p.m. So is it clear that people can actually park in those spots at other times?
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. It's not, if there's not a food truck there, they do get used up.
Okay. Thank you.
But we try to designate an area so there's no confusion on where they would be.
Councilmember B.
Thank you. So I just want to make sure I'm hearing right. So your recommendation is to stick with just Thursday?
No.
No, your initial recommendation was Thursday, because that's what we heard at Waterways and Parks. And is your recommendation to expand it to all days of the week then? No? Okay.
Yeah, the ordinance, we took out just Thursday too, just one night per week.
I see.
Any
Okay.
night of the week.
Okay. So if you were one food truck vendor, you could go any day of the week, but you could only do it once
At the one park.
at the one park. Oh, so you
you've
could
got-
you
you've
could do
got-
it 7 days a week as long as you were in 7 different parks.
Sure.
Oh, okay. I see. I'm really glad that you took the advice of the Waterways and Parks Commission. And since we had that discussion, I've anecdotally, I had talked to a friend who was looking to start a food truck, but learned that this ordinance was actually too prohibitive and decided not to do it. And so I'm really glad that we're expanding it even more than what was already planned. So it's good to hear. Thanks.
Councilmember Emanuel.
Thank you, Madam President. I too have heard feedback about just some prohibitive nature of food truck ordinances in the city, and so I'm really looking forward for the feedback that the city and the stakeholders will share on March 15th, because even if we provide kind of the space to do it, which is great, it's problematic. There's some logistical challenges that mobile food vendors have shared with me, such as just a licensing fee expense or kind of the sequencing of when food trucks are available. They need the reliability that they can go out and make, money every day versus, 1 day a week or something like that. So take this as a whole package, and so I'm looking forward to that. My question is about the suggestion of making a requirement to have at least one item on the menu, $2.50. Would imagine that doesn't necessarily fall in your wheelhouse. However, I wonder where could that be addressed to make sure that we're encouraging mobile food vendors to have food at an accessible price?
I'm not sure if I can answer it, but I know it was a suggestion that came out of the Waterways and Parks as a model that they had, I believe, in Madison, Wisconsin, that they have somewhat of an agreement. And again, I don't believe it's anything that's it's an ordinance requirement. It's something that if you work with the mobile food establishments, that they would come up with something to make it an enjoyable event for all families that perhaps, some that may be income challenged.
May I have a follow-up? Thank you. Are you able to maybe share an example of what that looks like in preparation for tomorrow's meeting? If it's indeed not an ordinance, but another way to address that? Is that something that council could consider in this proposal?
Well, I'm not sure if if that would be something that I'm able to address that. That, I'm not sure how Madison handled it. Haven't done that much follow-up with that, but it was just recommended that we look at that. And I think it would take perhaps us or neighborhood associations working with the mobile food establishments to request that. And as business people, I think they probably would look at that as being something that, if we can make that work, we'll make it work, satisfying the customer.
Thank you, Mr. Pippinger. Councilmember Weld?
Thank you, Council President. Just a little bit of clarification too, and as far as Madison goes, it started off with the neighborhood associations themselves arranging this food truck to attend, and the whole idea was the same as Mr. Pippinger's, is to get the neighborhoods out, to get them interacting, to get them to participate with each other, and begin that whole relationship. But the neighborhoods themselves put that stipulation out there for the food trucks. If they wanted to participate with their neighborhood event, they had to agree to offer the $2.50 menu item. It wasn't something the city mandated. It came from the neighborhood or the association, whoever was organizing it. They have now expanded it to more parks and more nights and things like that, but as far as I understand, the city has still not stated that they have to offer that. It's who's ever organizing this, who's done it. So.
Councilmember Strobel.
Thank you. Mr. Pippinger, I know when I replaced my lead service line, I called the department, and they had a whole list of vendors that you couldn't recommend anybody, but you had a list of vendors. Is that something that your department or somebody would have as a list of these food service vendors, so that if a neighborhood or a park or somebody wanted to, maybe get a list, it would be a nice centralized location where they could potentially get a hold of you and have somebody to give a call?
In the ordinance, it's a requirement that they take out an application and get a license. So once that would happen, yes, that would be doable. I don't see a problem. Currently, the health department would have on record all the food establishments that we have in the city of Eau Claire.
Okay, I see no further questions then. Thanks. Did anyone in the public come to speak tonight about an amendment to our mobile food establishment ordinance? Seeing none, the chair will close item 4, which closes the public portion of our meeting tonight. I thank citizens who joined us in chambers. While I'm reading the announcement of closed session, I'll read the announcement of closed session, which is that the City Council will now go into closed session to conduct the annual performance evaluation process of the city manager, an employee over whom the city exercises responsibility, which is permitted in closed session pursuant to statute 19.18, paren 1, paren C of the Wisconsin statutes. On a motion by Councilmember Weld, seconded by Councilmember Klinkhammer to enter into closed session, discussion is now in order. Councilmember Emanuel.
Thank you, Madam President. Wanted to just share my continued concern about going into closed session over this item. Over the couple weeks before we met last time and in the subsequent time period, I still have not received an answer about really where the documentation is that council agreed to this process form criteria and format. So I am not comfortable going into closed session, and I can see if other people want to share, but I really would like us to decide as a body just to make sure we're all on the same page on what that might look like for this evening.
Further discussion on the motion to enter into closed session? Councilmember Baton.
Thank you. I'd like to echo my continued concern as well, and kind of just reiterate my concern and the fact that I had on 2 different occasions requested a third party to guide our meeting. And so I'm also feeling uncomfortable with going into closed session, knowing that it's likely going to happen. But I will likely be voting no for that reason.
And further discussion? There being none, clerk, please
Madam
call
Chair?
the roll. Oh, Councilmember Emmanuel?
Thank you, Madam President. I'm wondering if we can talk about just what does the process in general look like? I know that the Human Resources Director shared a confidential document with council members on that matter. I'm wondering if we'll have an opportunity to discuss kind of ground rules or how the business will be conducted, who will be facilitating discussion, what happens if we don't agree on something, how do we take that up? Just items along those lines?
Yes, we will have that discussion once we're in closed session. We'll be approving an agenda and talking about the process before we even begin the process.
May I have a follow-up? Is there an opportunity for council members to have discussion around that and provide feedback? Thank you.
On the motion to enter into closed session, there being no further discussion, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Beaton?
No.
Emmanuel?
No.
Kincaid?
Aye.
Klinkhammer?
Aye.
Mitchell?
Aye.
Strobel?
Aye.
Von Hayden?
Aye.
Weld?
Aye.
Worthman?
No.
And that
T-Walt?
motion, oh,
Aye.
what is your,
Yes. Aye.
and that motion passes. We'll just take a brief recess while the camera.
The Eau Claire City Council meeting will return in a moment. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org. This program is simulcast on WRFP-LP 101.9 FM. We now return you to the Eau Claire City Council meeting.
This meeting of the Eau Claire City Council will come to order. Hear, hear. Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Beaton?
Here.
Emmanuel?
Here.
Kincaid?
Here?
Klinkhammer?
Here?
Mitchell?
Here.
Strobel?
Here.
T-Walt? Von Hayden?
Here.
Weld?
Here.
Worthman?
Here.
Zhang?
Thank you, Madam City Clerk, and welcome everyone to the Tuesday, February 27th meeting of the Eau Claire City Council. During our legislative session, the council deliberates and takes action on the agenda items before us. We have prepared for this responsibility by working with citizens and collaborating with staff and reading the considerable amount of materials in our packets. We do arrive this afternoon ready to fulfill our duty. We welcome citizens who are joining us in chambers and welcome those who are watching or streaming, let's see, I have to get this right, at Valley Media Works, formerly Community Television. Council has important items on its agenda and a full house this afternoon, so let us get down to work, which begins with the consent agenda, items 1 through 16. Council members have questions or wish to remove an item for separate consideration? Seeing no such desire, on a motion by Councilmember Von Hayden, seconded by Councilmember Mitchell, the consent agenda is moved and discussion is in order. There being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Beaton?
Aye.
Emmanuel?
Aye.
Kincaid?
Aye.
Klinkhammer?
Aye.
Mitchell?
Aye.
Strobel?
Aye.
Von Hayden?
Aye.
Weld?
Aye.
Worthman?
Aye.
And the consent agenda is adopted. That brings us to our business agenda, but prior to that, I have the delightful pleasure of recognizing the Chippewa Valley Writers Guild this afternoon for a first-time proclamation, and would invite B.J. Hollers to meet me at the podium, and any members of the Writers Guild who wish to join us.
Don't be shy.
Friendly faces. Usually what happens, I read a portion of the proclamation so people have a chance to just think about what we're doing here. And then I've asked BJ to say a few words, and if other people want to too, that would be perfectly fine. And while we're talking, Ms. Morrell puts together a presentation about your organization, so you can watch the monitor if you wish. Okay. May I just start out by saying that something I've said before, I guess, but Eau Claire is really riding a tidal wave of change. We are on our way to becoming a really great city. The City Council had a chance to talk about that in our strategic planning session last weekend, and it does behoove us to remind ourselves once in a while that we play a little part in making this great city what it is, the best she can be. And while it's not all our responsibility, we sometimes play a role that we don't recognize until times like this, when we can take a moment and proclaim an artistic endeavor that adds to the cultural vitality of our community, and have all of these people so excited about their artistic expression that I hope that you all feel very proud of our work. So, with that, I'll begin with the proclamation, which reads in part, whereas the City of Eau Claire recognizes that investment in the arts is important, and the City of Eau Claire appreciates the community's cultural engagement as it closely relates to economic vitality, education, engaged residents, and future success. And whereas the city celebrates many local impressive writers and their initiatives that foster and support authors and provide robust, high-impact programming for literary lovers throughout the region. And the Chippewa Valley Writers Guild is a community organization committed to supporting writers throughout the region, and has over the past 2 years played a role in helping hundreds of writers publish their work, and has hosted 11 summer retreats and 2 winter retreats, which provide visitors and therefore community economic impact, and has hosted free craft talks, readings, workshops, and partnered with a wide array of local and regional businesses and other organizations to host special events, and most recently published a community literary magazine called Barstow and Grand. Now therefore, the City Council does hereby acknowledge the commitment of the Chippewa Valley Writers Guild in supporting writers throughout the region by providing a nurturing environment for writers and we do encourage citizens to celebrate and promote the written arts in our community.
Thank you very much. All right. Well, thank you all so much. Thank you, President Kincaid. Here at the Guild, we like to say, be inspired, inspire others. And when I look behind me here at all of these people, many of whom I didn't even know prior to the Guild's formation, it's just really inspiring to see all the work we've done together, a group of strangers who came together and are now friends working for a common good for our city. the cheerleading that I typically do was just done by way of the proclamation, so I'm not quite sure what to say at this point, other than that it really is a community effort driven by a lot of folks who've come together. When I think back on some of my greatest moments being a member of the Guild, two anecdotes stand out, so I'll share those very briefly. The first took place at our writers' retreat at Saranaika in Fall Creek. 5 more retreats coming your way this summer, so take a look at our website for more on that. And a few of us were in a room. We were trying to crack the code of this little piece a friend of ours is working on. We couldn't quite figure it out. Hours passed. We finally found the right words, and then several months later, driving my car, WPR's on, and there's that piece booming from the radio. And it was just a beautiful moment and just one example of people coming together for a common good. And the second anecdote occurred during Barstow and Grain's release party, and that's mostly due to the good work of Eric Rasmussen here, who took that duty on. And we're sitting there, and the room's filling, and before I knew it, it was the largest crowd. And Nick Meyer can quote me. He was the one who said this. It's the largest crowd he'd ever seen in his store. It was out the door. Fire marshals would probably be worried if there are any watching at home today. We took all precautions, let me assure you, and had a wonderful night. And that was really the moment for me when I realized that some spark was lit here, and that it went well beyond just the people in this room, but to the larger Chippewa Valley as well. So thank you all so much for this incredible honor, and we look forward to serving our community for the years to come. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Thank you.
Writers on. Writers on. So, an event that we really enjoy at the beginning of many legislative sessions. But now we have to get back to work, and we do so by opening our business agenda with item 17, a resolution granting a temporary Class B fermented malt beverage and temporary wine license to CVTC Foundation for the Alumni Association Spring Gala. Ms. Stromberger.
Thank you. So this is an application for a temporary beer and wine license for an event at CVTC on April 12th. It's their spring gala for alumni, and it's to present students with some scholarships as well. The event will be in the CVTC Student Commons. They expect 300 to 340 people. It's a 21-plus event with the possible exception that some of the scholarship recipients might be under 21. It will be a cash bar. Bartenders will check IDs before any drinks are served, and there will be 2 licensed bartenders present. And the applicant is present if there are any questions for them as well.
Questions for Ms. Stromberger or the applicant? I see none, and thank you. On a motion then by Councilmember Strobel, seconded by Councilmember Worthman, item 17 is moved and discussion is in order. And there being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Emanuel.
Aye.
Kincaid.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Mitchell.
Aye.
Strobel.
Aye.
Von Hayden.
Aye.
Weld.
Aye.
Worthman.
Aye.
Beaton.
Aye. And that resolution passes, and good luck with your event. We wish you the best. Item 18 is a resolution authorizing the Chippewa Valley Council Boy Scouts of America to conduct the Chippewa Valley Air Show on Saturday and Sunday, June 16 and 17 at the Chippewa Valley Regional Airport.
If
Ms.
we could
Stromberger.
take item 19 together with it as well.
Oh, and item 19 grants a temporary expansion for fermented malt beverage license at, throughout those dates, June 14 through 17. Okay? Ms. Stromberger?
Thank you. Filling in real quick for Mr. Pippinger this afternoon. So the special event is just on June 16 and 17, but the license expansion is for the 14th through the 17th. There will be a private chamber event on June 14th from 5 to 8 p.m. that alcohol will be served there as well, but it will not be open to the general public. So the event itself will be June 16 and 17 with the Blue Angels in town doing a show. It is a repeat event, but it has been several years since it last occurred. So service of alcohol will be only in limited sections. It will not be served in the general area. It'll only be in the reserved seating, the VIP seating, the chalet area, and the President's Club. The beer, the city only has a beer license for Hangar 54, and that will be served in clear cups. They'll be using wristbands to mark those who are of legal age, and that wristband will be required before any alcohol is served. So with that, I'm happy to take any questions, or a representative of the Boy Scouts is here as well for any questions.
Questions for Ms. Stromberger? Would the person from the Boy Scouts like to speak about your event? Sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't.
I guess I'm nominated. Tim Olson, and I am Vice President of Special Initiatives for the Boy Scout Board, and have been involved with air shows back to 1983. In our community, the Boy Scouts 2008, 2010, and 2015 have been their past shows that they have organized. As far as any other information you want to know about the air show itself, it's Father's Day weekend, should be a good event. We have a lot of interesting things similar to past events, but one especially interesting addition to this year's event is a B-29 called Doc. I don't know if you've heard of that before, but there's 2 in the world that are flying B-29s right now. That's the same plane that flew the bomb over Hiroshima in World War II. Not the exact plane, but the B-29 plane, and this one was not flying for 45 years. It was sitting on the Mojave Desert and deteriorating, and they restored it. It took 15 years to do that, and a year ago or so they started flying that now. It was in Oshkosh last summer, and we're going to have it in Eau Claire. So that's one interesting thing that you will see that week at our show, and so you'll be amazed when you see that. It's a pretty important piece of our history. So. As far as anything else with the air show, any questions? Carrie?
Member Von Hayden has a question right here.
Not so much a question, just a comment that, yes, it's very exciting to hear that Doc is coming to town. My son had the opportunity to fly in Doc over at Oshkosh at the air show, and it's quite a thrilling thing, and it is quite a beautiful airplane. So thanks for bringing it to the community.
Yes. The other thing about that is we actually are going to be doing rides in Eau Claire Thursday evening at 6:30 and Friday morning at 9. There's a charge for that. There's only going to be, I think, 9 or 10 per flight that'll be able to go. 1 in the bombardier, 2 in the cockpit, and 6 in the plane, so 9 total. And that's one thing they do to help offset the fuel costs. Every time they go up for an hour, it's $3,000, so just for fuel. But it's cost $30,000 in fuel just go from Wichita, Kansas to here and back. So it's an expensive proposition to have them here. So
It sounds like every year the event just gets better, so thank you. And I think we've solved the traffic problem, right?
which one?
Okay, never mind.
You know, we deal with, the police is part of the planning process, and so we've done an extremely good job. They have with traffic control, and I know we also are doing one thing a little bit different this year. We are not charging for parking. We have a major sponsor to pay for that. The last show, that was one thing that we had to stop every car for coming onto the grounds, and now it's free, so it should move a lot quicker too to get people onto the grounds, and that's why we did that too. So.
Thank you, Mr. Olson. We enjoyed your information.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm. And let's see, on a motion then by Councilmember Emanuel, seconded by Councilmember Beaton, item 18 is moved. Discussion. Councilmember Emanuel.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to take this opportunity to just publicly thank Tim Olson for his community leadership. I had an opportunity to really get to know him through my board service on Visit Eau Claire. I am certain I would have never met Tim if it weren't for my board service, and I really have appreciated your leadership. You are somebody who's level-headed, complicated issue. You sit down, listen, think about it, and I know from conversations with you that bringing this event to the community is a multi-year process. When one ends, you start the next one. And I'm just heartened that these young men who are working with youth or Boy Scouts have such a great role model and a mentor. So I want to thank you for your service. And young men, take note, you got a good servant leader there working with you.
Further discussion? And there being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Kincaid.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Mitchell.
Aye.
Strobel.
Aye.
Von Hayden.
Aye.
Weld.
Aye.
Worthman.
Aye.
Beaton.
Aye.
Emmanuel.
Aye.
And that resolution passes. The related item 19 grants a temporary fermented malt beverage license on a motion by Councilmember Weld, seconded by Councilmember Klinkhammer. Discussion. And there being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Mitchell.
Aye.
Strobel.
Aye.
Von Hayden.
Aye.
Weld.
Aye.
Worthman.
Aye.
Beaton.
Aye.
Emmanuel.
Aye.
Kincaid.
Aye. And that resolution passes. See you in June. Item 20, as we move along our business agenda, is a resolution awarding a contract for procurement of the pedestrian bridge at the Confluence Project. Mr. Solberg.
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
The resolution before you awards the, basically the superstructure for the bridge that will connect Haymarket Plaza with Phoenix Park. We received 3 bids, 1 bid for the bridge itself, another bid for the decking for the structure, and then a 3rd bid for the assemblance and the placement of the bridge in place. Future bids for the supports to hold the bridge up will be coming in association with the wall, and that's estimated to come in April. The total of the 3 bids being awarded tonight are $815,900, and we did include in the estimate a cost for electrical for lighting, for pedestrian lighting and other lighting, and a contingency for it to bring this portion of it just a little less than $1 million for the bridge. Anderson Bridges from Colfax is the company that will build the bridge. Market & Johnson will supply the wood decking that goes on it, and then Lenda Construction will assemble the bridge in the plaza area and then put it into its final place. With that, I'll take any questions.
Questions for Mr. Solberg? Guess not. On a motion then by Councilmember Von Hayden, seconded by Councilmember Mitchell, item 20 is moved and discussion is in order. Councilmember Strobel.
Not discussion so much, but maybe just a comment on it. I'd like to commend Mr. Solberg and his staff for all the hard work they did on this. I know he's been researching these bridges for several years here, and I think he came up with a really nice design. And I want to commend staff as well for reaching out and getting donations from contractors. I don't know how often that's happened, but I see that we got a donation from Anderson Bridges and also Market & Johnson to help offset the cost. I think that's huge, and I think you did a really nice job on that. So I'm excited to support this.
Councilmember Worth.
Thank you, Council President, and I want to say thank you as well to Mr. Solberg for the work on this and city staff. I think this is really important because it's helping to create a connection that thousands upon thousands of folks are going to use over the years. And for folks that are sort of new at seeing this is something that we've discussed for a long time. And the fact is that with Phoenix Park, with the bike trail connections, with parking that's happening on the other side of the river, there's so many benefits to having this bridge. And like I said, I think in years to come, we're going to look back and say, wow, think of the thousands of people that have accessed our downtown, made our downtown a better place. And this bridge is really a connection between, two areas of our downtown that we put a lot of hard work into. So I'm really excited to help support this, and thank you again for the staff work that went into this.
Councilmember Von Hayden.
I too want to congratulate the staff and the effort and soliciting the contributions. I forgot to ask the question earlier, and that was, did we receive any other contributions for the bridge? There was supposedly, as I thought, possibly some private-public partnership on this. Did that materialize, or is it pretty much just these contributions and the rest coming from the city general fund?
We haven't bid the other portions of the project yet. For the wall that will hold up the Riverwalk and Haymarket Plaza. We'll have opportunities there as well, additional lighting, and then the abutment in Phoenix Park. So those would have an opportunity for donations in the future, but we had to get this portion of the bridge built because there's a 2 to 3 month time from the time the contract's awarded until the steel is in Colfax being assembled into a bridge. So that's why these are a little bit ahead of all of the opportunities that will be out there. So far with the first 3 opportunities, we were able to get donations towards 3 of those.
So you'll continue looking for contributions to help offset the cost?
We will eagerly embrace any contributions, whether it be on the bridge, the plaza, or the trail from now until October. So, yep.
And seeing no further discussion, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Mitchell,
Aye.
Strobel,
Aye.
Von Hayden,
Aye.
Weld,
Aye.
Worthman, Beaton,
Aye.
Emmanuel,
Aye.
Kincaid,
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
And that resolution passes. Item 21 is a resolution approving a site plan in a P-Public district for Haymarket Plaza at the corner of Eau Claire Street and Graham Avenue. Mr. Ivory and Mr. Solberg gave a long presentation last evening. Council members have questions regarding that presentation? On a motion then by Councilmember Emmanuel, is that right? Yeah. Sorry. Seconded by Councilmember I'm sorry. I'm sorry. On a motion by Councilmember Strobel, seconded by Councilmember Worthman, item 21 is moved and discussion is in order. Councilmember Emmanuel.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm thrilled that we get to vote on this. We're kind of like getting close to our home run hit here with this package. So as I look back on this, some of the excitement that I feel around this project is that citizens were able to come together and to help design this plaza through an exercise called a placemaking exercise and the Power of 10. And that was an exercise that was helped fundraise by many people here in this room, including community leaders up at the City Council and through community members, such as Mr. Hollers, who offered his services to be auctioned off, and my husband offered his musical services to be auctioned off. And we had citizens who contributed money to help pay for this really meaningful civic engagement exercise. And the Power of 10 looked at 10 elements that would be part of that design process, and with each of the 10 elements, there were 10 more tucked away in there, and really looking at what is the power of collaboration and how do we bring people together in a meaningful public place. And if the chair will allow me, I'd like to show a rendering of kind of a before and after. It's a 2000, I'll have to check it here, but it's a 2011 rendering of the plaza, and I think it's really interesting to see that comparison to what we have now. Yeah. So this rendering is a good rendering. There's nothing wrong with the rendering. What I see in it is that there are some design elements that have been significantly changed based on feedback from citizens. So one of the feedback that we heard from the placemaking plaza exercise was, do not make this Phoenix Park Part 2. Make it something unique where it stands out on its own. Another element was to bring really the water and fire elements to this place for people to gather. So this potentially could be a year-round gathering space. And now that's what we see. We didn't have it there before. So I also think about a citizen who gave this input on, we need a place where kids can gather and kids can play in the water and splash pads. And I said, that's a great idea. Would you consider serving on waterways since you're so passionate? And the individual said no. And then I badgered the person again, and I think maybe Councilmember Mitchell helped to recruit this individual. And now got to be part of, and now serves on the Waterways Commission and got to be a part of the whole approval process. And so, and this plaza will have those water elements and places for kids to come and gather. So not only did we bring citizens together around this exercise to plan this, I really have to say I love the design work that has come to play. Mr. Solberg, I thank you for taking that input. If folks weren't here last night, one of the things that was kind of neat in the new design is that there were benches that were aligned, and I guess the feedback was given that it looks too church pewy. And so they redesigned the logs into making it look like a log jam, and it's got a good sense of humor right there in the plaza, and Mr. Solberg will show us that. And so not only is it less pewy and more loggy, the new logs, how they're arranged, help citizens to have more of that face-to-face interaction. And that's what's important as community members, is that we have that meaningful interaction. So when the kids are playing in the park, the splash pad, maybe gathering around the fire, that we can have these community conversations. And if you're an introvert and that doesn't get you excited, there's also a place for you at the plaza with some benches that are kind of off to the side with a nice bag for you to relax and read and enjoy being by the elements. When I was looking at all of the stonework that's trying to kind of do a matching pattern and trying to be very tasteful, you see that many of the benches and the chairs and the plaza will be elemented with many types of stones. And so I have to say, Mr. Solberg, this rocks. Thank you.
Thank you. Further discussion? Councilmember T-Walt.
Thank you, Council President. I also just want to comment on the part of the designs, the way it worked. The other thing of putting backs on some of the benches that allow people with different abilities to be able to enjoy it rather than just assume we can all strike any pose. And it's accommodating to all generations, and that's fantastic to see. So looking forward to it. Nice work.
And further discussion. Councilmember Strobel.
Yeah, thank you. I was just thinking about this as I'm sitting here. I was just recently at a downtown Eau Claire Inc. Awards dinner, and I don't know if a lot of the public knows this, so I'll bring it up now. But the city engineering staff and the city won the best downtown development of the year for the Carson Park Causeway. And looking at this project, if Mr. Solberg submits the bridge and the plaza again next year, you might need a bigger shelf.
Councilmember Mitchell.
Thank you. I'd also like to say that I think for a single project, this one probably had the most public input of any we've ever done. I think about 3,000 meetings were held, and from the time this one was done, from placemaking to the very end, there was a lot of community input. And the two things that I took from all of those meetings were that people wanted a gathering place. That's what they wanted this to be, a gathering place, and they wanted to be able to touch the water. And I think that you have succeeded in providing the community with both of those things. Good job.
Okay, thank you for all of your input. There being no further discussion, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Strobel,
Aye.
T-Walt,
Aye.
Von Hayden,
Aye.
Weld,
Aye.
Worthman,
Aye.
Beaton, Emmanuel,
Aye.
Kincaid,
Aye.
Klinkhammer,
Aye.
Mitchell.
Aye.
And that resolution passes. Ooh. Item 22 is a resolution approving the final plat for Hidden Meadow Phase 3, located east of Dreyer Road. Mr. Tufti.
This is the Hidden Meadow development located off Drya Road and Horlocker. And most of the development is complete. The third phase is this small area here. That's the preliminary plat for the project, and all the lots are, for the most part, under construction. We're looking at these 5 lots on the south end of the project, and there then is the final plat for the project. It is consistent with the approved preliminary plat. It does create 5 lots for single-family development. This road that is dedicated with this plat is part in city jurisdiction, part in the town of Washington jurisdiction, so a jurisdictional agreement will need to be in place for the development of that road. Planning Commission has recommended approval subject to that agreement being in place. Are there any questions?
I see no questions. Thank you. And on a motion by Councilmember Emanuel, seconded by Councilmember Beaton, item 22 is moved. Discussion? And there being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember T-Wald,
Aye.
Von Hayden,
Aye.
Weld,
Aye.
Worthman, Beaton,
Aye.
Emmanuel,
Aye.
Kincaid,
Aye.
Klinkhammer,
Aye.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Strobel.
Aye.
And that resolution passes. A related item, number 23, is a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a development agreement with Southwest Land Holdings for street and utility improvements. Mr. Jensko.
Well, this is the development agreement that goes along with the final plat Darrell just presented, and it's a little bit different than some of the other development agreements because, as Darrell referenced, most of Dryer Court is not within the city limits. I'll start by going through the more routine items. It has special conditions for financing. In this case, it's a letter of credit for $148,395. There's a dedication of a stormwater easement to get the drainage off the road back into the stormwater facility that was designed for the complete development. There's construction inspection and development review fees, and there's a reimbursement for some costs as this property annexes and then ultimately connects into the utilities. Where it gets to be a little bit different is that there's a jurisdictional transfer agreement that's being worked on with the town of Washington because the right-of-way is primarily in the town, but is being constructed to serve mostly city lots. The main elements of the agreement are that the right-of-way will remain in town, and the reason it has to is that this is the connectivity that goes, well, actually starts up here and comes back and back through here, and that's what connects the finger of the town over by London Road, keeps it connected. And then this parcel here is not in the city, so there's got to be some connectivity for it as well. So it stays in the town for that, but the developer will build all the infrastructure at his cost, but it will be built to city standards, and city ordinances will apply for the infrastructure and the boulevards and the sidewalks within that right-of-way. And the city will maintain the roadway and the utilities because it's primarily serving city lots. There's one house in the town on the south side. So basically, it's being treated as it's city right-of-way other than it's actually in the town for connectivity purposes. The developer has not requested sidewalk deferral, and so sidewalk will be required along the parcels that are to be constructed within the city. And there's a segment here to pick up the house from Watton Acres that was built as part of an earlier plat. They constructed the sidewalk in the front, but at that time there was no road coming down. So this developer will be required to build that stretch of sidewalk. And that's consistent with other development agreements where there's a stub for future construction. The timing of that sidewalk goes with when the house on that parcel would have been built. So in this case, this developer will build that sidewalk. These pieces of sidewalk will go in as the houses are constructed. These were already ordered under the first phase, but this part hadn't been built yet because that house hasn't been built yet. So those are the unique elements. With any questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Question, Councilmember Strobel?
Thank you, Mr. Jensko. Of the, all the properties there are the ones with the blue city lots? Is that how that, or can you tell me?
Yeah, well, let me do it this way. The corporate limits go like that, then so this is in the town, this is in the town, and this parcel is in the town. The remaining parcels are in the city.
Okay, thank you. That helped.
And then that's the connectivity as it keeps going back up to Otter Creek.
Okay, I see no further questions. Well, thank you. Very nice drawing. And on a motion by Councilmember T. Walt, seconded by Councilmember Weld, item 23 is moved. Discussion? There being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Von Hayden.
Aye.
Weld.
Aye.
Worthman. Beaton.
Aye.
Emmanuel.
Aye.
Kincaid.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Mitchell.
Aye.
Strobel.
Aye.
T. Walt.
Aye.
And that resolution passes. Item 24 continues our business agenda with a resolution approving the final plat for Session Street Twin Homes located on the south side of Session Street, west of London Road. Mr. Tufti.
This is the property off Sessions Street and London Road. And that was the preliminary plat for the property. It's creating 6 lots for 3 twin homes. And then this is the final plat. 2 of the twin homes have been built, and you'll see how the lot lines run right through the middle of them, creating the units on both sides, and then there's room for 1 more twin home to be built up in the front of the property. Again, the preliminary plat is consistent, or the final plat is consistent with the approved preliminary plat. And this is the first project then that comes under the recently approved joint cross-access and maintenance agreement provisions that were placed in the city code. And the attorney for the applicant has created that and has been reviewed and approved by the city attorney's office. So that'll be recorded with this document if you were to approve it. Plan Commission has recommended approval subject to that agreement being recorded with this final plat. Any questions?
Questions for Mr. Tufti? I see none. On a motion by Councilmember Klinkhammer, seconded by Councilmember Von Hayden, item 24 is moved. Discussion? And there being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Weld.
Aye.
Worthman.
Aye.
Beaton.
Aye.
Emmanuel.
Aye.
Kincaid.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Mitchell.
Aye.
Strobel.
Aye.
Von Hayden.
Aye.
T. Walt.
Aye.
And that resolution passes. We move into a series of resolutions regarding the Crest Ridge development, the first being item 25, a resolution approving the final plat for Crest Ridge, located on the south side of Grover Road. Mr. Tufti.
The Crest Ridge property is right here. This is Grover Road and Tiffany Lane. And that is the preliminary plat for the property. It extends a cul-de-sac into the property, created 15 lots for single-family development. A CSM has been filed to create the lot around the large existing home that was on the property. And then this is the final plat for the property. Again, the final plat is consistent with the approved preliminary plat. It creates 15 lots for single-family development. An outlot is created and dedicated to the city for stormwater purposes, and they have legally defined and labeled the steep slope on the back end of these 3 lots as non-buildable. The Plan Commission has recommended approval.
Questions on the final plat? I see none. And on a motion by Councilmember Mitchell, seconded by Councilmember Strobel, item 25 is moved. Discussion? And there being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Worthman. Beaton.
Aye.
Emmanuel.
Aye.
Kincaid.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Mitchell.
Aye.
Strobel.
Aye.
T-Walt.
Aye.
Von Hayden.
Aye.
Weld.
Aye.
And that resolution passes. Item 26 and 27 are related. 26 being a resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into a development agreement with JCAP Real Estate for street and utility improvements. And item 27, deferring sidewalk deferring sidewalk adjacent to the plat of Crest Ridge. Mr. Jensko.
Yes, thank you for allowing me to present those together. I would recommend that you still vote on those two items separately. This is the development agreement for the plat that Daryl just presented. It has special conditions for financing. In this case, the letter of credit is $292,445. It includes language for the drainage easement coming back to the stormwater facility, and then the easement to bring the storm sewer back out and up to connect to the system in Grover Road. It includes construction inspection, and it includes development review fees. In this case, the developer has sent in a letter requesting sidewalk deferral. By ordinance, sidewalk would be required adjacent to the right-of-way of all the right-of-way within the plat. And then it would include the right-of-way on Grover Road as well. Sidewalk exists on the north side of Grover Road. It does not exist on the south side. With the request for deferral, what they're requesting is the deferral along Grover Road in the plat and along the lot here that's part of the CSM. It was not part of the plat, and so their request is defer it because it's not part of the plat. For Grover Road, there's no sidewalk along the south side. And as you go along Grover Road, it's in and out of the city of Eau Claire, mostly out in this area, so it's mostly in the town of Washington. So it wouldn't connect to anything. And then this one's a little bit different. This lot is not part of the plat. The house is already constructed, but there is no sidewalk on Grover Road to connect to. So that's the reason for asking for the deferral, as I understand it. And so it's your call whether you would choose to defer that or not.
I think the resolution defers as you described.
Right. If you adopt the resolution that's in the packet, these deferrals will occur. If you defeat the resolution that's in the packet, this is what will be required.
Okay. Thank you. Questions for Mr. Jensko? Councilmember Worthman?
Thank you, Council President. Mr. Jensko, just so I understand, there is sidewalk on the north side of Grover Road currently?
Yes, there is sidewalk on the north side. There is not sidewalk on the south side.
Okay.
Unfortunately, our aerials, it's very treed, forested in that area, so it really doesn't show the south side very well. Otherwise, I'd have a picture to show you.
Councilmember Mitchell?
Yes, thank you. So the sidewalk there on Crest Ridge Drive Court, the deferred part, that'll probably never get built.
Never say never, but in my opinion, the only way it would be built is in the future if there is a drive to put sidewalk along Grover Road, which has already been constructed with curb and gutter without sidewalk. But at such time as that road gets reconstructed, or maybe a sidewalk network is requested, or a bike multi-purpose trail, at that point when it's being looked at on Grover Road, segments like this would probably be part of that analysis and the connectivity. So never say never, but probably not in the near term, probably not in the very middle term either.
Councilmember Strobel?
Yeah, I had a question for you on the part that's going to be deferred on Crest Court. Say it was built. At some point in time when it maybe had to be replaced, would it be the responsibility of the property owner that has the large house there that's not part of this development, or whose responsibility would it be? The development agreement's only for this initial phase, right?
Well, this initial phase is the entire plat.
Oh, it is.
This is the plat. This parcel is not part of the plat. So if you were to order this sidewalk to happen now, it would be the responsibility of this developer to build that sidewalk because this house is already there. However, once it's built, it will be the responsibility of this property owner to snow blow that, clear it. And in the future, if there's repairs that need to happen to it from trees or for whatever reason, it would be the responsibility of this property owner to absorb those costs. If construction is delayed for some future project, then it will be entirely the responsibility of this property owner to pay those assessments at that time.
That's what I was wondering about, the snow removal. And then, have we heard from that property owner at all on this either, or not?
I have not.
Okay.
Admittedly, I've been on vacation for the last week and a half, so.
Nice. All right, thank you.
And any further questions? I see none. Thank you. So on a motion by Councilmember Worthman, seconded by Councilmember Emmanuel, item 26 is moved. Discussion? And there being none, clerk,
Council
please.
President.
Oh, sorry, Councilmember Worthman?
Just so I'm clear, the resolution that we have right now does defer? Oh, sorry. Okay.
And further discussion on item 26? There being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Beaton.
Aye.
Emmanuel.
Aye.
Kincaid.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Mitchell.
Aye.
Strobel.
Aye.
T-Walt.
Aye.
Von Hayden.
Aye.
Weld.
Aye.
Worthman.
Aye. Aye, sorry.
And that resolution passes. Item 27 is a resolution deferring sidewalk as described. On a motion by Councilmember Beaton, seconded by Councilmember T-Walt, the item is moved and discussion is in order. Councilmember Ruthven?
So just looking at that area, one of the things is that Grover Road connects just a couple blocks down to a trail that's there. The soccer park is only probably 4 blocks away. Stein Boulevard is 3 blocks in the other direction. So it just seems like there are a lot of opportunities for connections for kids that want to go play or be at the park, et cetera. So I just want to kind of bring that to council's attention as we look at this.
Further discussion? There being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Emmanuel.
Aye.
Kincaid.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Mitchell.
Aye.
Strobel.
Aye.
T-Walt.
Aye.
Von Hayden.
Aye.
Weld.
Aye.
Worthman.
No.
Beaton.
Aye. And that resolution passes. With that, we end our resolutions and enter into our ordinances for action. We have 4 of them tonight, beginning with an ordinance rezoning property on the south side of the North Crossing, east of Jeffers from C2P to R3P, and to adopt a general development plan for an apartment. Mr. Tufti gave a presentation, and we had a public hearing on this matter. Any further questions for Mr. Tufti? On a motion then by Councilmember Weld, seconded by Councilmember Klinkhammer, item 28 is moved. Discussion? And there being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Kincaid.
Aye.
Klinkhammer.
Aye.
Mitchell.
Aye.
Strobel.
Aye.
T-Walt.
Aye.
Von Hayden.
Aye.
Weld.
Aye.
Worthman.
Aye.
Beaton. Aye. Emmanuel.
Aye.
And that ordinance is adopted. Item 29 is an ordinance for which the applicant has withdrawn his request. The chair seeks a motion to postpone indefinitely.
So moved.
So, second.
Uh, On a motion by Councilmember Emmanuel, seconded by Councilmember Von Hayden to postpone indefinitely, discussion is in order.
Can Mr. Tufti come to the podium? Is this the last time that you're going to address anything here?
Yeah, might, maybe, probably.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Any further discussion on the motion to postpone? Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And opposed. That item is postponed indefinitely. We have two more ordinances for our work tonight. Item 30 being an ordinance amending Section 13.12.066 of the code entitled Mobile Food Establishments. Mr. Quala.
Good evening. Stepping in for Mr. Pippinger tonight. Before the council is an ordinance amending Section 13.12.066 of the Code of Ordinance entitled Mobile Food Establishments. The City of Eau Claire has an ordinance that allows licensed mobile food establishments to vend and sell food in city parks. The amendment expands this ordinance to include the following neighborhood parks for year-round availability: Lakeshore, Boyd, McDonough, Half Moon Lake, and the following parks for the months of June, July, and August from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. Newell Park, Cameron Park, Mitchell, Demler Park, and County Farm Parks. And we've got some, I can identify those areas on the maps if we could do so. Oh, that was last night? Okay, thank you. The Waterways and Park Commission recommended their approval at January 24th at their meeting with an additional recommendation of not limiting the day to only Thursday, but allowing it every day of the week. Additional recommendations would be that, but not part of the ordinance, would be that at least one item on the menu be less than $2.50 for an entree, and possibly more seating options. If there's any questions, I'd be happy to entertain those for you.
Questions for Mr. Quala? Is that
Yeah.
Councilmember Worthman?
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Mr. Quala, for your work on this and the presentation. One of the things that we discussed a couple years ago was trying to figure out a way to really make sure that this is providing a lot of opportunities for the food trucks. We kind of had to look at other communities and what other communities were doing. And at that time, I think the biggest concern that I heard on City Council, and it wasn't everyone, but it was sort of this idea that we weren't going bold enough. And that was the concern then 2 years ago. I know that ordinance didn't really work out the way that we wanted, and so we're seeing these amendments. And I guess my question to you would be, what's sort of guiding the decision around having it only be one night per week, having it only be certain areas, those kinds of things? Like, what is sort of guiding your vision for what these changes are?
I think that the pilot, if you will call it that, where the ordinance was, established just a few short years ago, was moving into new territory. And from our experience in the parks division, it's been all positive. There's been little to no conflict that I'm aware of that we're allowing these vendors to establish themselves in our parks. And I think a natural expansion of that idea, where we're increasing the number of parks and the opportunity and availability for mobile food vendors to apply their wares, if you will, is a very positive thing. I think it'll encourage neighborhoods to come together, try to establish a consistency where neighborhoods can get together one night a week, perhaps. And again, that human connection of bringing neighborhoods together, I certainly believe has definite positive impacts.
Can I ask a follow-up? I guess what I was trying to get at is why could it have been even more expansive in terms of what's allowed and what food trucks can do?
Could it be more?
Could it have been? Yeah. Could it be any day of the week? Certain, instead of restricting locations, gone bigger on that.
Being careful with the fact that we would not conflict or impede special events, and a number of our special events are increasing every single year. And oftentimes the special event organizers have their own, their own foods and things like that. But we certainly are encouraging a special event organizer to work with these vendors as well.
Okay.
that may have been one possibility.
Thank you.
Councilmember Von Hayden?
At the presentation last night, there was a comment made that there may be, or there will be a meeting with some of the food vendors or the food truck people early in March or thereabout sometime. And I guess the question that I have is, because it doesn't appear that there will be a lot of food trucks going out in the next month or so, it would seem to me it would make a lot more sense before we adopt this concept, and which I think is great to expand it. I think the whole idea and the concept that's being proposed here is very positive. But if the food truck vendors have some additional information or comments, it would seem to be more practical and feasible to wait and then come back with a total ordinance and to pass this now and then amend it later. Do you have any comment on that?
I know if they seek more input, we'd be happy to, sit down with those folks that have the mobile food trucks and entertain, additional ideas, if that would be the case.
Further discussion? No. No. Oh, question, Councilmember Emanuel?
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you, Mr. Koala, and I'm sorry Mr. Peppinger couldn't be here. There was other pressing matters, so thank you for sharing. My question is, I need to seek some clarification on exactly what this is, because I feel like I'm confused still on, is this indeed one night per week on a day and in a location identified per the license, or is this every night during the week? I feel like I've heard both, and I need some help.
Mr. Peters? Oh. Mr. Nick?
The way I read the proposed ordinance amendment is it's one night per week, but it could be any night of the week, where an initial draft that received comment had identified just Thursday. So this reads one night per week on a day and location identified in the license. So for one park, it might be Thursdays, if that's what that neighborhood and a food truck vendor finds works, but in another it could be Wednesday or Tuesday or any other day of the week. But the concept, at least in this proposal, is it's one day per week in any given park, I think, to avoid overuse of the park, which obviously is a policy decision for you all to make.
May I ask a follow-up, please? Thank you. So, so as I'm recalling how we talked about it last night, it's food truck, I don't know, Mama's Tortillas, right? That's a made-up name. I'm making that up, although anybody's welcome to start that one. I'll be there. So Mama's Tortillas says, I want to go to Campus Park on Monday, and then could go on to Cameron on Tuesday, and then to Mitchell Park on Wednesday. Just couldn't go back to Campus Park until the following Monday or afterward. Is that a correct application of how this reads?
Just rereading it, because I haven't spent a whole lot of time with this one, but that is how I read it, yes. It's the limitation is, per park, per neighborhood, so, you're balancing various users of the park and impact on that park, but so long as the different parks are open and available, a single vendor might be able to rotate through several parks in a given week.
Okay, and may I ask one more follow-up?
Do you mind if Mr. Peters makes a comment?
If I could just add to that a little bit. So and maybe building on some of the other, is the idea is that we would work very closely with the neighborhood association and try to get promotion and energy and momentum around having one night that there's the activities and because remember also part of this is that we would bring games down to the park as well. And so to try to make it more of a come out to your park night, and then the food is there. And so versus the truck just showing up any night. So trying to have it be so it's more successful for the truck because the truck will know that there's a certain amount of energy and people that are, geared up to come down and be part of it. But the idea is that it's very much in conjunction with the neighborhood and say, well, what night would you like your park night to be? And then work with the food trucks to come with that night.
Did you have a further question then, Councilmember Emanuel?
Thank you, Madam President. Just a follow-up, my understanding is in the last 2 years, we haven't had any challenges in the park, perhaps because we've had very minimal food trucks actually utilize it. If not, maybe the number is 0, or maybe 1 or 2, but it's been very, very low. Is that correct?
Mr. Peters.
It'd be my understanding that unless it's been related to a special event, we have not had any food trucks that just have, used the spaces that had been allowed and provided for by the earlier ordinance.
Any other questions? On a motion then by Councilmember Mitchell, seconded by Councilmember Strobel. Item 30 is moved and discussion is in order. Councilmember Von Hayden.
I'd move we defer this until the staff has the time to meet with the food vendor or the truck vendors and evaluate the ordinance as written and see if there are any further suggestions that they'd have from them.
A motion has been made by Councilmember Von Hayden, seconded by Councilmember Strobel to defer the ordinance passage until a meeting occurs with the vendors. Does that sound? Is that acceptable?
Yes, that's my understanding that there's a meeting scheduled sometime in March with them, and that's what I'm talking about.
Okay. I suppose you should say deferred until after a meeting with, a planned meeting with the vendors. Okay. Discussion on the motion to defer? Councilmember Emanuel.
Thank you, Madam President. Question for staff. Do you know if there's been any request that if we do delay this, that this would significantly impact food trucks or even marginally impact food trucks?
Thank you. I'm not sure if Mr. Koala has more to add to this, but my understanding is why we were bringing it forward now is that it would give the food truck vendors time to prepare and but I don't know if, the meeting's mid-March, if we brought it back the first part of April, if that would have a significant impact on them or not. But I know we were trying to get it in so that they would have as much time to work and plan and do whatever investments they needed to do, so.
I would echo Dale's same thought. There's a window here, but I think if we look at the months where we'd see that most of that activity would be June through August.
Councilmember Strobel.
Thank you. I really appreciate staff initiating this program and to try to bring more things to the neighborhoods and to encourage the food truck vendors. But we did hear last night that there was a meeting scheduled in March, and they were concerned about some things. And as Councilmember Emanuel said, they haven't taken an opportunity to use the existing parks at this point. And so maybe we want to have that meeting first in case there is some things we can tweak that would get them more excited about it, and then come forward so we don't have to do any changes. So that's why I supported a postponement.
Councilmember Welch.
Thank you, thank you, Council President. I guess I'm not in favor of the deferment of the ordinance. I think the whole idea of this was to create some sort of bonding and strengthening of our neighborhoods and allowing them an opportunity or reason to gather and get together. And I think if this gets delayed out till April, it does become a scheduling issue and a timing issue, and I don't know if the neighborhoods themselves will have the opportunity to be able to plan something and have enough advance notice to do that. And I think that we can still accomplish both things. We can still approve this ordinance, allowing at least that space to be devoted to the mobile food establishments. And then if there are any concerns that the trucks have with existing ordinances that might conflict with their success, that we work those out at a later time. But I want to get back to the spirit of the idea, and that is to create this event on a weekly basis in our parks to draw the families out and amongst each other. So.
On the motion to defer, Councilmember T-Walt.
Yes, thank you, Council President. I concur with Councilmember Weld. At first blush, I see the logic of deferring it, but I have to compliment our staff. They are responsive to residents, they're responsive to vendors, and if they come back from the March meeting, they would come back with that. So I like seeing it move forward, and so so that's my position on it. Thanks.
Councilmember Klinkhammer.
Thank you, Madam President. I agree with the previous two speakers as well. I think the intent of this is for the communities to grow safer communities and a more enjoyable community and neighborhood. We put the time in last night listening to this at the hearing. We debated it now, so voting on it now isn't going to take that much longer. And if there's an amendment that needs to be made to it after this meeting, I mean, what's the problem? I think we want to give the neighborhoods every opportunity we can.
Councilmember Von Hayden.
Just briefly to comment so that somebody doesn't get the misconception that we were opposing this. It has nothing to do with opposing with the neighborhoods. They have ample opportunity because they know, based on our comments, that we're all in favor of the new locations. All we're really talking about here is making it a better ordinance so that when the neighborhoods approach the trucking or the people that would provide the services, they would be on the same page. And that's all we're really talking about, is let's sit down and discuss the issue with all of the people that are involved. Because if the neighborhoods want to have it and for some reason or other it doesn't work with the vendors that are providing the service, we don't accomplish anything. So that was the only reason I was saying this. I think it's one of the things we wanted to do. We've had the discussion that we want to get everybody on the same page, and that's all this is about.
Councilmember Emanuel.
Thank you, Madam President. If the body will allow, I'd like to request a 5-minute recess.
Second.
A motion has been made for a 5-minute recess, seconded by Councilmember Worthman. Discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And those opposed? The 5 minutes having expired, the chair will call the meeting back to order. We are continuing our discussion on a motion to defer the mobile food establishment ordinance. Is there further discussion? There being, Councilmember Beaton.
Thank you, Council President. I'll also be supporting the motion to defer. I really, really love this idea and, love the idea of neighborhoods coming together for 1 day a week. And I think that this could be really good for our neighborhoods. I think that it's really heavily contingent upon whether this works for the food trucks, though. And if this doesn't work for the food trucks, it's going to be hard to make it work for the neighborhoods. And so I think that this is an opportunity for really meaningful engagement with the constituency that this ordinance really affects so closely. And so I'm supportive of deferring until after that engagement happens.
Councilmember Worthman.
Council President, thank you. If I could just ask a clarification question, because I think I've heard a number of times that this ordinance wasn't worked on in concert with the food truck stakeholders. Am I hearing that? Is that correct? Or was this crafted with their input?
I'm not sure who can respond to that question. Ms. Stromberger is approaching.
Sorry, just to clarify, are you asking specifically this amendment or the ordinance as a whole a couple years ago?
This set of amendments.
I don't know that they were consulted as to which parks. We did have a meeting with 2 food truck vendors, I believe it was just last week, and they were excited to see that these parks were being added to the license. You know, they do want some additional changes, but they were excited about seeing these parks added.
Okay. Could I ask a follow-up? The timing, the once per week, and sort of the restrictions on that, was there feedback on that too?
They didn't say anything about that.
Okay.
Thanks, Ms. Stromberger. Any other discussion on the motion to defer?
I have a question.
Councilmember Emanuel.
Thank you, Madam President. This might be a question also for Ms. Stromberger, or maybe other folks would know. After the meeting, I'm guessing just per the sequencing of events, the ordinance was already drafted, and then a meeting was held. And so I'm wondering if any of those changes after the meeting and the ordinance was drafted are here in front of us, or that's really what perhaps the March 15th meeting will capture.
Yeah, you're correct that all the changes were already made. So none of the input that we received at that meeting is reflected in this ordinance. I guess I would say most of the changes that were mentioned would not be ordinance specific.
Thank you again. And further discussion? If not, clerk, please call the roll on the motion to defer.
Councilmember Klinkhammer,
No.
Mitchell,
No.
Strobel,
Aye.
T-Walt,
No.
Von Hayden,
Aye.
Weld,
No.
Worthman,
Aye.
Beaton.
Aye.
Emmanuel,
No.
Kincaid.
No. And that motion fails on a 6-4 vote. Right? Yeah. We're back to the mobile food establishment ordinance as moved by Councilmember Mitchell and Strobel. Further discussion on the mobile food establishment?
Council President.
Councilmember Emanuel? Oh, Councilmember Emanuel.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to thank Councilmembers Von Hayden and Strobel for bringing that up for discussion. I do think that I think it would have provided an opportunity just to kind of make it a little bit more neat and tidy, and there's my head that really appreciates that, and then my heart says this is a little bit more progress than no progress. So that's where it's like 51% of me feels that way. So I do see where you're coming from, and I thank you for that. I would like to offer an amendment, and that is on page 151 on section, oh man, I don't even know how to read this, but we'll say capital letter P under number 5 and subsection little c. And I'll offer the language, but the intention is to make this every night during the week. So I would offer to strike the language that starts with 1 night per week on a day and in a location identified. I think that's where the strike would end, so that it would read, and County Farm Park per specifications of a license issued in accordance with this section, et cetera. So that's my intention, is to make it every night during the week, and I'm very happy to entertain any amendments if that language doesn't meet that goal.
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilmember Worthman. A motion has been made to strike after the words farm park in P5 sub C, all the way to, I guess, after the word "and." In a location identified. So we're just removing the one night per week. You probably have to take out the words "on a day" also, through the word "and." Okay. Discussion on the motion. Councilmember Klinkhammer.
Thank you. So if I understand this correctly, you want them to be able to have a food truck in the parks that are mentioned every night of the week if they chose to.
Councilmember Will?
Thank you, Council President. And I thought Mr. Peppinger had said yesterday, and I think it was mentioned again this evening, that, the idea of the one night a week, was to, I guess, prevent from it being overused or to create any distractions to people that want to use the park for other reasons, and then also not to compete with our special events. And, I trust the idea that if this demand is so successful that we'll continue to add. I can't imagine we'd ever say no to going to 2 nights or 3 nights, but I think the idea of what was proposed was, to prevent there to be this monopoly or domination of all of our parks every night with food trucks. And I guess I don't know if I'm in support of every night right now, but I'd like to see it to stay as it was proposed.
Councilmember Von Hayden?
I agree. I think the one night per week was in there for a reason, and that reason was primarily for the neighborhoods, because a neighborhood association is not going to have an event every night of the week. They want to schedule this when it would fit with the neighborhood, and the idea was to bring the neighborhood together. If a park had enough volume every night to support a food truck, it would probably make sense, but that's going to be very doubtful that there will be enough volume in any one park on a given evening, unless there's a special event for bring more people in there, because you need to have a certain amount of volume to make it feasible to do it. And we don't want to set up something that's going to be counterproductive in that. We want to make it something that would be good for the neighborhoods, and that's the intent of this, is so the neighborhood and the food vendors get together, make the reservation, they get the volume, the people get to communicate, talk, have a good time, and everybody works it out. So I think there's a good reason for the one night a week.
Councilmember Worthman?
Thank you, Council President. Just a little history is that 2 years ago, this came in front of us, and the reasons why what we were doing were spelled out, and there was a whole lot of question marks that came up. Are you sure we're going far enough? Are you sure this is going to work? We had some of those same questions. We didn't have, besides a couple special events, no one applied for, no one brought their food truck to those locations. And when we heard Mr. Pippinger say last night, well, originally we proposed just doing it on Thursday nights, but now we're saying one night a week, it could be any night. I just get the sense that that somehow we're not sort of opening it up broad enough, and I think the same thing is happening. Like, I don't fully understand what the logic is between the first proposal that was made for these amendments just being only Thursday nights and going to just one night per week. Like, I don't understand what the logic is there, but one thing that does make sense is that folks here are talking about what's going to be good for neighborhoods, what's going to be good for the park, but what about what's just good for food trucks to be able to choose this park works for me or this park doesn't work? And that's kind of what I think this proposal is getting to is food truck finds that Boyd Park has kids that are at the skate park every night or whatever it is, different choices that they might make to decide this is the park I want to be in. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, that's sort of allowing the food trucks to decide what they would like. I 100% agree we want to work on, as a city, trying to get our neighborhoods more involved, but we could do that as well. I think that can still happen, and food trucks could have a decision point about what they want to do. I have a strong sense, and I'm basing this on what we've already learned over the last 2 years, that we're probably going to be back here again, either next year or 2 years from now.
Councilmember Mitchell?
Thank you. Just to be clear, we're adding Boyd, Lakeshore, McDonough, and Half Moon as, along with Owen and Phoenix, so they can go there anytime, as many times as they want. Okay, but they're not limited to one night a week. And the thinking behind the other parks is that the neighborhood association would do the initiating, and they would say, we would like to have a picnic, we'd like the neighborhood to get together. They probably won't even do it one night a week all summer, but I know there are times when the neighborhood would like to get together, and now they would be able to do it. I'm not real familiar with a lot of these parks, but if you've ever been to Demler Park, no food truck is going to park there and expect a crowd, because that's just not going to happen. You'd have to have the whole neighborhood plan it, bring the people, in order for it to make any sense for a food truck. So I think that's the thinking behind it, that they're not just going to park there and hope some people walk by. It would be a neighborhood event. And I think one night a week for 3 months is actually more than will even happen.
So, Member Strobel?
Thank you. I was agreeing with Councilmember Worthman and looking at B on this amendment here, and it says Boyd Park Lakeshore, but then I listened to Councilmember Mitchell, and she's telling me that under B, those parks can be every night. Is that the way it is? And those were the ones that I was most concerned about, with a lot of activities going on that might be more useful for a food truck to go to every night. So getting that clarified in my head here makes me think that I'm okay with initially the one night a week.
Councilmember Emanuel?
Thank you, Madam President. So I'll speak in support of this for a few reasons. One, I think it provides opportunity for consistent policy enforcement, that if it's every night during the week for all the other parks, it will make this easier for business owners and citizens to know that, yep, this works in all of these parks every night of the week. The second is, I totally appreciate the neighborhood engagement. I think that's a wonderful endeavor. I know the city's worked hard on updating the website on maybe the block party page. Lots of cool stuff on there. Coob, you can have firefighters come. They like to eat some of your picnic food too, so make sure you got lots of that there. And some other activities for neighborhoods. I think that's fantastic. I see that can still complement the efforts, even if this was every day of the week. And what I'm concerned about is, even though this is a potentially coordinated effort with neighborhood associations, my concern is, what if something happens to the leadership in the organization where maybe they don't have the person power to organize with the food trucks, and therefore, because the organization efforts haven't happened, then they can't be there. So that's a concern of mine. I also feel that businesses, this is like really small startup businesses, and I don't think we would restrict the hours of most other food restaurants in the community to say, okay, you can be open one day a week, take turns on those nights, and only between these hours. I think that these people are just as much as business owners as somebody who has a bricks and mortar. So that's important to me. Two additional reasons that I have are the Waterways Commission, who is tasked to look over our parks and our waterways, evaluated this, and their recommendation from our citizen experts is to make this available every night during the week. And so I want to incorporate their feedback. And last, when the city initially took up this food truck ordinance a couple years ago, I was really excited about it, and I'm still happy that we have it. What's happened, what I've observed in the last couple of years, is when I talk to a food truck vendor at a community event, I'll ask, well, how's it going? And how, you know, what's it like? And they've honestly laughed in my face and have said, like, these are not really helpful policies that you have, and we have to change it. And so while I think people appreciate that we're trying to move forward, I'm worried that we're kind of tiptoeing towards progress, and we've got some watered-down progress versus, let's turn a corner. It's pretty simple, 7 days a week, not a big deal, and go forward from there. I think everything can still coexist.
Councilmember Weld.
Thank you, Council President. Just a couple of clarifications in regards to Councilmember Worthman's question. You know, originally it was designated as one night a week, and Thursday night was the night that was proposed to the Parks and Waterways Commission. And, you know, the discussion came up right away as Thursday night is such a busy night already. Phoenix Park is full, and so we didn't want to distract. We wanted to leave opportunities for other neighborhoods to have, you know, other nights that maybe could work for everybody to still enjoy Thursday nights and so on. And secondly, the Parks and Waterways Commission did not recommend 7 nights a week. We recommended what was presented in the ordinance, one night per week per park. But you know, the only suggestion from us was that it not just be Thursday night, that the vendors or the neighborhoods could choose a night, any night that week to operate their, or to host their event. The other comment about, you know, limiting the hours that they're able to work, I think that they can still operate their food truck in any park, you know, that allows it 7 nights a week, or any of the other parks that only allow it 1 night a week, but they just can't go to the same park, you know, more than once that week. But they can still operate 7 nights a week in the city of Eau Claire as much as they want. So I don't think we're holding them back at all, and I still believe that we are going to be flexible, and if there's demand and we need to open this up more, why wouldn't we do that? I think we would do it in a minute, so.
Further discussion before I get back? Yeah. Councilmember Emanuel.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you for the clarifying remarks, and I think that's helpful for me to understand, and I appreciate that. I guess I would have some concerns about the speed of responsiveness for looking at these changes. I had asked if we could look at some of these changes sooner than later, and I was, the response I was given from the city side of things of who would be working with this was to please wait. Let's let basically 2 food truck seasons go through. And I don't think it's a bad idea to get feedback, but 2 years is a really long time when you're trying to make a go at it and you're trying to support, you know, your family, and you need to make $300 every day. You got to count on that. So I feel like this is a moment of opportunity. Let's open the gates as much as we can and go from there.
Councilmember Beaton.
Thank you. I'll be supporting this amendment as well. You know, I think that this, though I do see that maybe there's not capacity in all of the parks, I think that this could be something that down the road could attract more people to our parks. You know, having people in parks is proven to create community cohesiveness and safety among a neighborhood. And so any way that we can attract people to a park, I think is a good idea. You know, this could be the deciding factor of a family going to a park or not, if they can, you know, go in the afternoon and stay for dinner and until dark. And so I think that this really could attract more people to our parks, even though we're not seeing that kind of traffic now. And honestly, I don't see any problem with having food trucks and options for meals in our parks. I truly think it creates more of a community there to share food amongst neighbors, and so I can't agree with the sentiment that this could be abused by food trucks or overused, and so I'll be supporting and But either way, I'm happy with the changes, and I'm happy that we're going to be expanding, or hopefully expanding this ordinance either way.
And there being no further discussion on the motion to amend, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Mitchell,
No.
Strobel,
No.
T-Walt,
No.
Von Hayden,
No.
Weld,
No.
Worthman,
Aye.
Beaton.
Aye.
Emmanuel,
Aye.
Kincaid,
No.
Klinkhammer.
No.
That amendment fails, so we're back to the original ordinance as unamended. Any further discussion? There being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Strobel,
Aye.
T-Walt,
Aye.
Von Hayden,
Aye.
Weld,
Aye.
Worthman,
Aye.
Beaton,
Aye.
Emmanuel,
Aye.
Kincaid,
Aye.
Klinkhammer,
Aye.
Mitchell.
Aye. And that ordinance is adopted. The last item on our agenda tonight is an ordinance amending Chapter 3.12 of the Code entitled Tax Rolls. Mr. Solinger?
Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
The state of Wisconsin administers a property tax relief program and provides property tax relief credit payments to taxing jurisdictions around the state. If a municipality's share of those credit payments exceeds $3 million, it can apply to the state to receive those payments directly rather than have them first routed through the county, which would otherwise be the typical practice. Traditionally, this was accomplished and effectuated by having the city council adopt a resolution each year applying to the state to provide those direct payments. The state's most recent biennial budget act changed the local legislative action from a annually recurring resolution to a one-time ordinance. So that's the reason for the ordinance before you this evening. The effect of this is that the state will provide these direct payments in perpetuity. So we won't have to have an annual readoption of a resolution. We can undo that, or you can undo that with future legislative action, or if the city were to fall below the threshold to qualify for that direct distribution, we would no longer receive that. The effect of having this, and really the significance of this ordinance and having these direct distributions made, is that we receive those tax credit payments about 20 days sooner than we otherwise would, which equals in the range of $3,000 to $3,500 in additional interest revenue by having that payment received 20 days sooner. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Questions for Mr. Solinger? I see none. I think we understood. Thank you. And on a motion by Councilmember Worthman, seconded by Councilmember Emmanuel, item 31 is moved. Discussion? And there being none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember T-Walt,
Aye.
Von Hayden,
Aye.
Weld,
Aye.
Worthman,
Aye.
Beaton,
Aye.
Emmanuel,
Aye.
Kincaid,
Aye.
Klinkhammer,
Aye.
Mitchell,
Aye.
Strobel.
Aye.
And that ordinance is adopted. There are three ordinances for introduction tonight. It's my responsibility to read them into the public record. It begins with an ordinance amending Section 8.28.100 of the City Code entitled Yards and Lawns. Another ordinance for introduction, item 33, is an ordinance amending Section 9.56.050 entitled Public Good Order, Chapter 9.79 entitled Taxi Cabs and Motor Buses, and Section 1.24.030 entitled Deposit Schedule of the City Code of Ordinances. And lastly, an ordinance for introduction, an ordinance amending Chapter 6.14 entitled The Keeping of Honeybees of the City Code of Ordinances. Do council members wish to suspend the rules and take up any of these ordinances actions tonight? Seeing no such, Councilmember Emmanuel.
Thank you, Madam President. I have maybe a point of inquiry. I do have a question about the public good ordinance, and it's really just a process question. I'm not interested in voting on it tonight. Am I allowed to ask a process question about that tonight? Thank you. I see that, I'm guessing there's many students from the university that are here tonight. I see at least 2 familiar faces, and I'm taking an educated guess that there's some others. And I know that there are differing opinions at this point on engagement around this issue. And so I thought since they came out tonight, I would like to ask staff if there's any additional intentions to work with the student body at the university between now and our next meeting, if any plans are in the works.
Mr. Nick, do you venture a response?
Sure. Yeah, we've had a number of meetings with them already, and those include meetings on February 7th, a presentation to the full Student Senate on February 12th, and there's a further meeting planned on March 1st at the university with both university staff and students.
Thank you, Mr. Nick.
May I ask a follow-up?
Inquiry?
Mm-hmm. Thank you. As the ordinance is written now, will there be any changes to it, or is it because it's been introduced for action, will we be voting on what we see here?
Mr. Nick?
Certainly. There certainly have been a number of changes in its development stage, including during those meetings I just mentioned and with other stakeholders. It is now introduced and before the council, so it's at a legislative phase. So what happens to it from here on out is up to your policy discretion.
Thank you.
There being no further
Council
questions.
President.
Councilmember Ruthven?
Thank you, Council President. Further question on that was, and I had sent an email yesterday but didn't see a response. Were the groups that were mentioned before, they were supportive of this idea? Like they were stakeholders who were supportive of this idea coming forward?
I'm not sure that's a proper inquiry to describe the nature of the meeting. The meetings were scheduled as described. If Mr. Nick wishes, he could offer some opinion about whether there was a good dialogue, perhaps. Mr. Nick?
Certainly, if you want me to respond. But again, you'll have a public discussion on it upcoming where those interest groups mentioned or any other member of the public can state their own opinion. But yeah, I think it's fair to say that whether it was the neighborhood associations or the students or student faculty, alcohol interest groups or private owners, I mean, they all had differing perspectives. So, but all those were very much held. There was input sessions at an administrative level before this was drafted, and then you can hear their opinions directly at your next meeting.
Thank you. If I could make a directive too.
We don't offer directives anymore.
What's the appropriate term?
We don't offer directives anymore.
What's the term? What's the new term if it's not directive?
There isn't a new term. We removed that from our council agenda.
Okay.
Announcements are now in order,
Maybe
Mr.
it's an
City
announcement.
Manager?
Thank you, Madam President. I have a series of announcements this afternoon. One is just a quick update on the Transit Fare Study. As you know, at your last meeting, you had some feedback. Last Wednesday, we had feedback from the Transit Commission. We're currently evaluating that process, that feedback, and incorporating it and doing a little more research. So the project is underway, and we would hope to, to wrap it up in the next, 30 or 45 days at the latest. But so that's underway and going. So just wanted to give you an update on that. Another little update, we learned today that the Health Department received its accreditation, and I believe there'll probably be some more formal action for you that in the later time. And just a little further follow-up on something that Councilmember Strobel mentioned earlier, and that is that indeed, last week on Thursday night, the DECI awarded a Public Works project as the Downtowner Award as the best new development in downtown, which is really cool. And so, Mr. Solberg, if you would come up, we'd like to just again hand this to you and recognize that your hand in making the Causeway project the best new development in 2017. So congratulations and very, very well deserved. And some nights we have no announcements, other times we have a few. So I actually have a couple more. One is to announce that we have selected a new community development director. His name is Scott Allen. He works for he's currently the community development director for Blue Springs, Missouri. He's been in that role for 12 years. And he and his wife and 4 children will be starting in that position on April 16th. So, and as soon as he's here, we'll introduce that. And then, of course, then that brings us to the fact that we needed to replace the community development director, and that's Daryl Tufte. And so this is indeed Daryl's final evening with us as a council and a council meeting. Daryl started with us in 1985, and he's worked his way up through the ranks and has been the director of community development for the last 12 years. Certainly, Daryl is an incredibly strong advocate for comprehensive planning and riverfront, beautification and neighborhood revitalization. I don't think we could ask for a more loyal public servant who's thoughtful and dedicated and respectful, and there's nobody that knows more memories and details about how this community has been built in the last 33 years than Daryl. And he's just an all-around nice guy. And so I think we'd like to wish him a long and happy and healthy retirement. So Daryl, thank you.
Thank you. I do want to say one more thing.
Point of order.
I've had a wonderful 33-year career with the city of Eau Claire, and I've been able to work with a lot of groups, councils, plan commissions, other boards and commissions, business associations, neighborhood associations, and other groups, and I have had a wonderful staff with me all these years. And what I found in working with all these groups is that I've had a career where we really made a difference in this community. We really did a nice job, and I really appreciate that, so thank you.
Finally then, although it's rather spontaneous and it's a little hard with a humble Norwegian to recognize, there's no big formal party, but the staff will be gathering down at the Lazy Monk to toast Daryl and his career, and certainly all of you are welcome to join in just a little gathering for Daryl following this meeting. Purely social, the attorney says.
Announcements by council members? And on a motion by Councilmember Beaton, seconded by Councilmember Tewalt, there being no further business to come before this body, we are adjourned without objection.
This program was brought to you by a cooperation between Newsworks and the City of Eau Claire. A transcript of this meeting is available for the hearing impaired. It will be available within 7 days of this telecast. Call 715-839-4912 or TDD 715-839-1689. Or write Eau Claire City Clerk, P.O. Box 5148, Eau Claire, Wisconsin 54702-5148. Newsworks is made possible by continuing community support. If you would like to volunteer or make a donation, please contact us via phone at 715-839-5067 or online at valleymediaworks.org.